And we're streaming. Here we go. Here we go. I made it. I did it. I'd like to start with a big apology to everybody out there. This last week and a bit has been bad for me. Just straight up. It's been tough. It's been a difficult little bit. It's been difficult for everybody, I think. And I'm definitely in a down sort of place, in a down sort of mood. And I suspect I'm not the only one. I'm not going to be the only one, I think. I've been seeing a lot of frustration and a lot of anger. Methane, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. Eric, good to see you, my man. It's... Where to even begin? Where to even begin with this? Content, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. We are absolutely living in a moment where Ligand to Z, good to see you, my man. Like, it's here. It is here. That we live in a new reality. We live in a new place. We live in a new country or environment. And it's obvious and it's clear that what happened? The genocide in Gaza happened? The whole thing? Has it become normalized already? Has it become regular already? Is everybody just used to it already? We're all just, oh yeah, right. Has that happened already? Did I miss the boat? Everybody's already moved on to the next thing. Are we talking about Taylor Swift? Is that what we're all talking about? Because I'm still not there. I'm still living in a place where we are living in a fascist country, nakedly fascist. There's no pretending anymore. Then there's no excuses that can be made, and there's no reason to discuss it any other way. There's no apologetics that can be made. The people who are acting as the apologists are literal fascists and detached, total, deluded idiots at this point. We have commentators. I think the clearest example is actually Ben Shapiro. I think Ben Shapiro has just gone mask off full Nazi. It's really, really obvious that that's what's happened with him. He was always one of these guys that was sort of flirting on the edge and was sort of, you could like find a clip or find a thing and be like, oh, I don't know. Sounds pretty bad, right? But the stuff that's coming out of his mouth now is literally like, oh, this is straight up just some fascist Mussolini shit. This is straight up, right? I mean, the commentary about the meme that you're seeing here is real simple. Like, this is who we're choosing. We don't have a choice. Like, there's no electoral solution. That's not real, right? That's not a real thing. We live in a fascist country that has gone completely mask off, totally genocidal, raving lunatics at the helm of this thing. The best that you can possibly get is a little head tilting like, oh, while they continue to pull the switch, while they continue to press the button, while they continue to do just the most absurd, ridiculous bullshit that you've seen in your lifetime. In your lifetime. This is a full-scale genocide, and I'll say it over and over and over again until they finally take me off the platform, because that's where this goes. Right? That's where this goes. You don't commit a genocide and then just, like, not go full Nazi, right? You don't just, like, massacre an entire group of people, steal their resources, right? Blow up their homeland, and just leave it alone, right? It's always been this steady march, right? It's always been this steady march in that direction. And we're just kind of coming to terms with the reality that we are never going to be listened to, right? That our electoral system is not going to listen to us. It's not going to pay attention to us. It doesn't care what we think. right? It doesn't care what we think. Like, the system is not going to respond. We've seen 300,000 people were in the streets in protest. Like, that's hopeful. That's hopeful. It's hopeful to see 300,000 people in the streets. It's hopeful to see people shouting at Trudeau in public, yelling at him for a ceasefire. These are hopeful things, but this is exactly how they act, and this is exactly how they are going to act. He's just wandering around, little dumb smile on his face, right? You guys know my audio issues, but like, people screaming at this guy, right? And he's just dopily walking around. At one point, he like gives someone a hug, right? These people do not give a fuck about us at all. They don't care what we think. They don't care what we say. They don't care how we act until we finally become annoying to them. And then they're going to strip us off these platforms. And that's what's actually going to happen. Right? That's what's actually going to happen. Oh yeah, Matt Walsh is straight up. He's always been mask off, but he hasn't been influential enough. Right? Like, Matt Walsh is a straight up Nazi. Like, just black and white. Like, straight up. And that's not even like hyperbolic. Or hyperbolic. He calls himself a theocratic fascist. Like, unironically. Like, I don't know why people treat this guy as if he is credible. He's obviously a fascist. Like, obviously. Like, imagine calling yourself a theocratic fascist today. Like, this is who this guy is. And yet, for some reason, he's given a multi-million-dollar platform, right? People fund him. He has backing from advertisers, this sort of thing. And like, it's difficult for me to say that, like, I'm living in a place of pretty big emotion about all of this. That's the real truth. That for me, it's taking a toll, a genuine, real, emotional, existential toll, to recognize finally that we are going to do it. Like, it is going to happen this way. The society is not going to have a come to Jesus moment. It's not going to pull up. It's not going to have some kind of... That the revolutionaries are literally people like me, and the desperate sort of reactionary actions of people getting into the streets. But the political class is just going to wait for that energy to dissipate, and it will, right? And it will, because they've got us well disciplined, right? They've got us well disciplined through the paying of rent, through the paying of bills, right? They've got us well disciplined. That, okay, the plebs are having their little moment. They're having a little march in the streets. Are they destroying anything? Are they burning anything down? Are they threatening anybody? No. Are they even standing in the way? Right? Are they even getting into anybody's faces? Are they even doing anything to impede? Are they doing anything? No, they're just shouting. Okay, just smile and move on. Right? This will dissipate, and it will. And it will dissipate. Like, and then we'll all turn around and vote conservative. Like, we're all going to vote Trump. We're all going to vote Poilievre. Like, this is where we're going. That the empire doesn't even need to start doing this kind of shit, like Isaac is talking about. Right? Sophie Scholl was 21 years old when she was executed by the Nazis for voicing the atrocities of the Nazis. Like, the stuff that they're doing to the Palestinians, they will do to us. Like, they will. Like, I don't know why people think they're immune. Like, I don't know what immunity you think you have. I don't know what immunity this culture thinks it has to the death cult. That it's going to do this stuff to us. And that the people who are leading it are psychos. And it just seems like we're not really getting it as a people. We're not really understanding what the stakes actually are. We're not really putting two and two together. We're not actually realizing that, this is the normal now. Like, this is the normal. This is the society. This is what we are, and it's going to get more brazen. It's going to get more ludicrous. It's going to get more absurd. It's going to get more despicable. Because there's no consequences. Why wouldn't they? Like, can you give me a single reason why these politicians and why the leaders of our country would act any other way? Why should they? Why shouldn't they? Like, give me one solid reason why they just shouldn't be just genocidal maniacs. And the truth is that they absolutely can be, and they are being right in front of us. Because there's zero consequences. Like, what's the downside for them? Right? Like, one hopes that there's the unexistential reality that, they'll die and then burn in hell forever. Right? One sort of hopes that happens. But, yeah. We got this in front of us. 68% of American respondents in this poll agree with the statement that Israel should call a ceasefire and negotiate. So 68% of Americans responded in that way. That's hopeful, right? If we want to cling to something that's hopeful, right? But we know that the system doesn't respond to us. So, but it is nice to know, right? It's nice to know that it's only 31%. Only 31% of the society is absolutely manic, right? That we are actually the majority. That's the hopeful takeaway of all of this, right? Is that every single time we've been polled, right, it's the majority that is saying, hey, whoa, like, this needs to stop. This needs to stop. It is the majority that is saying that. And there is this small sliver of hope that emerges from this that says, oh, like, perhaps maybe some of these power-crazed, lunatic, psychopathic politicians, in their desire for personal glory and vanity, will actually acknowledge that, oh, wait a minute, the majority of people want a ceasefire. I could run a campaign on that. I could run a campaign on the idea that we should stop this so that I could become the congressman or the president or something, right? That the vainglory of the ruling class might be the saving grace. That a Trump-style figure might actually stand up and say, hey, wait a minute. The whole point is to get the majority on your side, and the majority wants a ceasefire. So I'm going to stand up and call for a ceasefire. Like, there's a possibility. There's something that might happen. But I'm not really holding my breath at this stage in the game. That the truth is that what we're going to watch, and it's tough. I know that I am struggling with it. I am struggling to exist in this society. I am struggling to walk around and talk to people. Like, every single conversation I have and every moment that I have is this expending of energy to not talk about this. Especially over this last period of time where I haven't been doing this. Right? That I'm sure that a similar thing is happening to you. That there's a biting back that needs to occur. Because we are watching the society descend deeper and deeper into fascism. And it's not going to get better. That the people who are fascists, right, are not going to have a come to Jesus moment. That these are the people that live in our society. That what they want is an extermination of an ethnic race, and we're going to watch it happen. Because they're the ones that have control, and they're the ones with the guns and the weapons and the bombs. Right? And by any account that I can see, we are going to see a expansion of this war throughout the Middle East. Right? Like, it's worth bringing up the... Like, we're entering a very dangerous moment. We're entering this very, very dangerous moment where Iran has made it very clear that should this continue, they will intervene and they will get involved and they will begin doing things. And you've got organizations like Hezbollah. You've got more and more African nations beginning to cut off trade and communications with Israel. South American nations. Recently, there was Belize, I saw, has pulled out all of its ambassadors and everybody from Israel. That the conflict is going to expand. The conflict between Jordan and Israel that has been going on for some time is going to expand. The conflict between Egypt and Israel. That this is going to expand and become a greater conflict in the region. You have Erdogan in Turkey recently basically saying that Netanyahu is a goner. Yeah, Bolivia cut ties with Israel. Vladimir, good to see you, my man. It's very difficult to see a path forward where Iran doesn't get more seriously involved. And there's even grumblings that I have seen that Russia is going to start funneling resources in through Iran in order to deal with this situation. What is this doing? Of course, the United States is getting more involved as well. They're sending aircraft carriers into the region. They're training and getting 2,000 troops ready to get on the boots on the ground in Israel. Like, this is escalating. That what is happening in Ukraine, or what happened in Ukraine, had the threat of escalation, but then it didn't escalate. That the wider European powers actually did step down. That NATO did actually step down. And now they're telling Ukraine, time to negotiate, right? That Russia is basically going to claim this territory, right? Russia's going to claim this territory. They're going to claim Crimea. That they have this territory. There's no way Ukraine is getting it back. A line's going to be drawn there. And then Ukraine will become smaller. And that's what's actually going to happen, right? This is showing every single sign that it's escalating. That it is a crime now in most of Europe to be pro-Palestinian. Like, literally, they have passed laws now. So if you go into the streets, like the protest that they had in Washington recently, in Washington, D.C., 300,000 people showed up in Washington, right? There was a huge protest. Well, if that happened in Germany, in Berlin, they could round those people up. They could incarcerate those people and put them in prison, given the laws that exist. So the society is collapsing downwards towards fascism in a very clear and obvious and very straightforward way. Big surprise, right? The place that spat out the Nazis is taking a hard fascist turn during a period of crisis, right? Yeah, huge chance for nuclear war. Well, I mean, you think about the position that Israel is actually in, right? Like, the position that Israel's actually in is very tentative, very tenuous, right? Like, they only act the way they act because they are in this sort of very, very tenuous situation. And it's very difficult for me to believe that Israel continues to exist, right? It's very, very difficult for me that Israel just stays here forever. That this is how it's going to be, guys. That Israel's definitely here forever, and the state of Israel will live forever, right? Forever and ever, and there will be no consequences, and nothing bad will ever happen to Israel ever. It's very, very difficult for me to believe that. It's very difficult for me to believe that. That what I think we're watching is Israel's self-destruction and self-implosion. That they are acting as brazenly as they are acting out of a sense of desperation. And this sort of sense of, this delusional sense of invulnerability that they feel like they've got exists only because they have the backing of the United States government and the United States. But the United States has a long history of abandonment. It has a long history of abandonment. It abandoned Vietnam. It just literally walked out of Vietnam. It currently abandoned Ukraine. Like, this is a full-scale abandonment. It abandoned its own allies in Afghanistan. Like, it has this huge, enormous history of basically just saying, well, that was fun. You know, oh well, mission accomplished, and walking out the door. And it will absolutely do that in Israel. It will absolutely do that in Israel. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, maybe not even 10 years from now. But there's a moment where finally the people of America say, we are no longer going to pay taxes to this. It is simply not going to happen. And it'll stop. Like, it'll stop. That Israel, and I think one of the most effective things that is actually happening that I've seen out there is people are pointing out that Israel has free healthcare, free education, right? They've got social systems in place, right? That Americans pay for. Meanwhile, the average American citizen is drowning in debt, right? Doesn't have medical care taken care of, doesn't have education taken care of, is living in a society that is in a perpetual decline. Yeah, I don't think the evangelicals will allow the United States to abandon Israel. They want to reenact or provoke biblical prophecy. Yeah, I think eventually the evangelicals will lose. Like, that we are going to go through like this period of time. Like, it is going to exist where we're going to go through this period of time, but that's not going to persist forever. Right? That's not going to persist forever. That there is going to be a moment where finally the evangelicals will reveal themselves for what they are, right? To every, like, if you're still clueless, right? We are looking at like fascists. We're looking at like high level, like delusional Christian fascists who are straight up trying to invoke the end times because they believe that it'll bring God back, right? That God will come down and sort everything out. And all we got to do to make sure that God comes back with Jesus Christ on his right-hand side is start the apocalypse, right? Like it's a death cult. Like, it's a death cult. And the death cult is happening. It's happening right in front of our eyes, right? Yeah, that's my absolute favorite, right? That they believe Jesus will return and save them, right? This is Haltosis 911 on Twitch. They believe that Jesus Christ will come and save them, and so they don't need to do anything, right? They don't need to act rationally, right? They don't need to actually do anything. Good to see you, by the way, Ben. You too, Isaac. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard was against the war in Iraq and Ukraine, but she's fine bombing Gaza. Yeah, she said Israel has a right to defend itself. Yeah, it's like I say, and I've said all along, this moment's been very revealing. Like, and people who like Bernie Sanders, for example, I think Bernie Sanders is the big one. To me, it's like the big wake up call for everybody that there's no such thing as a progressive leftist movement in the United States. It doesn't exist, right? That maybe there was some old guy who said like, hey, wait a minute, universal health care is a good idea. That's something that we should do. I know how I can get a lot of people looking at me. I know how I can spread a lot of influence and get a lot of power and ultimately sell books, right? I know how I can make a name for myself and gain more power within this system. I know what people think is popular, and so I'll say universal health care. Oh, goodness. Now everybody's shaking my hand. Oh, yeah, I'm selling a bunch of books. Look at me. I'm making a lot of money, all that kind of stuff. Oh, by the way, I'm still a pro-imperialist, pro-genocidal maniac, just like the rest of them. That my role in all of this was to play Hulk Hogan. That was my role, was to be the man of the people. That was my role that I was handed. That I stood up and said, here's a popular idea that the people think is popular, and it took, right? And it took, and so I took off. Hooray, right? And just like the rest of them, it was all just a vanity project for his own glory. That's all. That it was a show, right? That if you were a Bernie bro, right? If you were one of these Bernie Sanders bros, and don't get me wrong, like Bernie Sanders exists as a iconic figure that showed everybody that universal health care is a beloved, popular, and good idea, right? and is something that the populace, that there's support within the populace for. That's what he showed. Absolutely. But it's gotten really clear and really obvious, especially now, that he was doing it for money. He was doing it so that he could gain power within his own party and so that he could get wealth for himself. And he did. So good for him, right? Does he actually believe what he says? Yeah, maybe. Right? Maybe. Like, maybe it is the case that he actually thinks that universal health care is a great idea, right? Probably why he funds it in Israel, right? Probably why he thinks the Israelis having it is a good idea, right? So he just wants the empire to be more, better organized. That's all. Like, so there is no progressive movement. It doesn't exist. The quote-unquote progressives are just pro-imperialist maniacs who just want the victims of capital to have a slightly more organized time. Like, he doesn't think people should be thrown into the streets because they break a leg, right? But it's all this like militaristic idea, right? You want healthy soldiers. That's all. Yeah. Haltosis writes, I donated to Sanders in 2016. I'm past mourning his downfall in my eyes. He's a Zionist and not worth listening to. Yeah. Like, that's the hard reality. Like, there's no heroes. There's nobody in the system that's actually going to fight for you. Like, it's not real. They're fighting for themselves, and everything they're doing is scripted and well understood. Do you think the Canadian government would be willing to condemn Israel's war if they faced enough pressure? I mean, Trudeau has been saying, do I have that right here? I want to read this article today, by the way. This article's insane. Like, literally. Yeah, Trudeau criticized for calling on Israel to exercise maximum restraint in Gaza. Like, Trudeau is basically on the edge of it already, and he always was. That's what's interesting about Trudeau during this period of time, is like, it seems pretty clear that he is opposed to what is happening in Gaza, personally. Like, it seems as though he is sitting there going, this is no good. Right, he is the one that has been really spreading around this idea of a humanitarian pause. He's saying things like exercise maximum restraint and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, Trudeau's a pansy. Like, he's a weakling, and he always has been. Right, he doesn't actually have ideas. He doesn't actually have thoughts. He doesn't actually know what he's doing. Right, he's a drama school teacher who happens to have the Trudeau name. His deputy prime minister is a Nazi. Like, this guy is just a weakling loser who is never ever going to actually stand up and flex his muscle or even flex his power whatsoever. I've said this before of Trudeau, and I'll continue saying it forever. This guy is going to turn 90, right? He's not going to be the prime minister anymore. He's going to turn 90, and he's going to be sitting there being like, what did I even do? Like, I was the Prime Minister of Canada. What was my legacy? What did I achieve? What institution did I build? What still persists and still exists because of me? Right? And the answer is going to be fucking nothing. And the things that we'll be pointing at will be the despair and the desperation and the destitution that was spread under his tenure. Right? Like, this guy is a loser. He always was a loser. He was always just a haircut and a foofy face. And a dumb little smile with a little squint of his eyes, right? He never stood for anything. He did nothing. He is doing nothing. And now he's in a position where he could stand up and join the majority of people who want a ceasefire and are standing against this. He could do it and actually show that he has, courage, even a drop of cojones whatsoever, but he doesn't. He's always been a weakling. He's a weak leader, and he's never going to stand up and actually call for a ceasefire. That the only time this guy is going to call for a ceasefire is after the president of the United States has already done so. And if the president of the United States is doing it, then it's going to happen, because the president of the United States can cut the funding of Israel. Right? That's the real truth. That's the real truth. That if we actually cared about this, we would just stop funding them. We literally would just be like, it's over, right? Like, stop doing that. Your funding is now zero. You get no money from us anymore. Goodbye. Right? Like, we're giving them an allowance. Like, that's the truth. That the relationship between Israel and the United States is not that much different from a rich parent and a child. Right? It's not that much different. And that if the parent actually gave a shit about what its child was doing, it would just cut off its allowance. And it would just say, no more. None of that. Bye-bye. Goodbye to your free health care. Goodbye to your universal systems. Like, goodbye to all of that stuff that your citizens are benefiting from. Goodbye to your military funding. Goodbye to all of it. But the truth is that we in the West are doing this for a reason and on purpose, right? We want to do it. We enjoy doing these sorts of things. This is how the West has always operated. There is no moment in white Western European history where we have operated any differently than this. This is how we do business. This is how capitalism functions. That if it didn't do this kind of thing, then it would cease to be capitalism and it would become something else. So it's always been this way. It's going to continue. It's going to continue doing it this way. And a weakling coward like Justin Trudeau isn't going to stand in the way, right? That the system is going to be completely fine with Trudeau standing up and be like, hey, just be careful, you guys. Exercise maximum restraint. Hey, while you're going in there and bombing Gaza and exterminating all those people, just hey. Like, and eventually they're going to pitch the idea at us that we need to, we need to bring in Palestinian refugees. We need to bring in all these refugees, you guys. There's so many refugees. Oh my God, we need to bring them in. Oh my goodness, there's a real crisis going on in the Middle East right now, you guys. We got to bring in a bunch of Palestinian refugees. You don't want to bring in Palestinian refugees? What are you, a fascist? Like, well, I thought leftists were supposed to be compassionate. Oh my God, you don't want to bring in a bunch of Palestinians to help them during this period of time? Literally, it's a forced relocation. The forced relocation is going to get pitched at us as refugee aid, as humanitarian aid. That's exactly what they're going to do, right? And huge sections of the populace are going to buy into it. Huge sections of the populace are going to be like, oh yeah, the forced relocation of a people during a genocide, in a continued genocide, right? That's actually good for them. It's actually good that that's happening. They'll be safer here. They'll be better off, right? They're better off now, right? They'll be better off now. Of course they don't want to leave their country. Like, of course. like it's what they know. It's their land. It's theirs. Like, it's but this is what's going to happen to us. Now, DJ, I am sorry to hear that, my man. DJ writes, just got laid off from my job today. No notice at all. Capitalism is fucking brutal. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Like, I am seeing this in like real time in my own workspace as well. Like, I'm not getting hit with it, but I'm seeing people getting hit with that. Good to see you, Bex. And like, it is the system. It's the system of capital, right? That one guy is just looking at a chart, right? Just a board with numbers on it, right? Your name is not on that board, right? You are not a name even on that board. You are a number on that board. And the guy who's looking at the board with the numbers does not know you. You've never met him. You never will, right? You are like 5 steps removed from this guy, and this guy is 5 steps removed from you. And he's just looking at the board being like, well, the numbers are like this, and if we adjust this and do this kind of stuff, we can save that, and that eliminates this position, right? And if we eliminate that position, then that's going to save us money, and it's going to do this kind of thing. We can do that kind of stuff and adjust it, all that kind of stuff. And then they say, okay, cool. And then they just pass it down the chain until you're staring at some HR rep, right, who you barely know. Maybe you've had one conversation with, right? And they just hand you a pink slip and say, yeah, your services are no longer required. That's the system. That's how it works, right? I'm sorry to hear that it happened to you, DJ. Because, like this, like we are going through like this real period of massive, large-scale tragedy right in front of our eyes, but it doesn't mean that the small-scale, day-to-day stuff doesn't count. It just kills me that we're all still going to work, you know? Like, it just kills me that we're all still participating in all of this. But, I mean, what are we supposed to do? We've got rent, right? We got rent. It just kind of kills me that we can get 300,000 people in the streets, you know? But like, we're not getting 300,000 people in the streets to be like, hey, what's up with landlords? Why do they exist at all? Hey, what's up with this idea that we don't actually have any ownership whatsoever of any of these workplaces at all? What is that? It's odd, frankly. Ben writes, could Justin Trudeau become a stronger leader in the future as he gains more experience? No. Trudeau was always weak. Because he's a weak person. Like, he's just weak. Like, he doesn't actually have ideas. He doesn't actually have thoughts, right? Like, Trudeau is a performer. That's it. Like, he's a drama teacher. He's an actor, right? Like, he doesn't actually have convictions. You understand? Like, he doesn't have moral principles or ideas or thoughts along those lines. That he is essentially just a panderer who is a good performer. And that is all. And people are getting exhausted with the pandering. And you're seeing that across the board, by the way. Like if anybody saw the new South Park, the South Park guys released a new show, a new episode rather, on Paramount Plus, right? Leave it to a competitor of Disney to platform somebody to put the thumb in the eye of Disney. But and the entire episode was about how the culture has just become about pandering, right? That it's all just pandering. It's not about telling good stories or having convictions or being interesting or having anything interesting to say or even observing or critiquing the culture in an interesting way at all. It's literally just about pandering. Like the race swapping stuff that Disney was doing. Like, I ostensibly agree with that. I think that that's a good thing to do. I think it's interesting, right? But they weren't doing it because it was interesting. They weren't doing it in order to investigate those themes and those ideas and to see what it means to have a black Little Mermaid or any of that. They weren't doing that. They were doing it to pander, right? And that's basically Justin Trudeau in a nutshell. And he's just pandering the entire time. He doesn't actually believe in any of this diversity stuff. Like, Mr. Blackface, Mr. Aladdin Face, doesn't give two shits about your racial minority stuff. Does not care at all. Mr. Standing up and applauding for a Nazi in the middle of Parliament does not give a fuck at all. It's all pandering. And it's obvious that it's all pandering. And he's not going to gain more experience out of it. He's not going to become a stronger leader as time moves forward because this is who he is. And he's always been this way and it's not going to stop. He's not going to have a big come to Jesus moment and realize, like, wait a minute. There's actually a way that we could organize this so that it actually makes sense, right? There's actually something that we could do. Oh shit, we're going through all of this inflation and simultaneously big corporations are making more money than they've ever made before. I wonder what solution we could find here. No, better go after people for CERB, right? Better go after people for little dimes and nickels, right? That'll help balance the budget. Yeah, we're a very serious people, for sure. He's never going to confront the system of capital. Because he's a creature of capital, right? Like, and once you understand that, he's a creature of capital, that there is complexity in a figure like Trudeau, right? And it's the same complexity that exists in most of these guys. Like Stephen Harper is a good example. And most conservatives have this real difficulty There's a complexity to them where they're struggling with the three aspects of themselves. They're struggling with how to be a good Christian, right? Stephen Harper is like this. Most conservatives are like this, right? They're struggling with how to be a good Christian, with how to be a good capitalist, and with how to be a good person. And you can't be all three. You got to pick. And sometimes they do pick, I'm going to be a good Christian. I'm going to be a good person. And then a lot of the time they say, I'm going to be a good capitalist. Right? And sometimes they can even justify it by saying, well, I'm going to be a good capitalist and that makes me a good person. Or I'm going to be a good Christian, that makes me a good person. Sometimes they even try to say that I'm going to be a good Christian and that makes me a good capitalist. Or I'm going to be a good capitalist and that makes me a good Christian. That's the whole prosperity gospel. Right? As fraudulent and heretical as that is. But they try it and they do it. Right? But that leads to complex decisions, and that leads to paradoxes and contradictions is the word that I'm really looking for. That leads to a lot of contradictions, and people are very contradictory. Right? There's no such thing as a person that is constantly living in a singular state of total. Everything is in alignment, right? Like if a person actually achieved that in their life, they would be like a god of themselves. They would be like a type of spiritual being. If a person was actually like just a straight line, perfect balance, perfect alignment, right? No contradictions whatsoever. Everything they said absolutely was in complete and total alignment. Yeah, they'd be like a kind of spiritual god type. Right? Like that's what that would be. And that's not Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is a ball of contradictions because the forces that he attempts to serve contradict one another. That he can't serve his family legacy, which a lot of times he is serving his family legacy, right? He can't serve the interests of the First Nations people. He can't serve the interests of the Ukrainian Congress. Right? He can't serve the interests of Galen Weston. He can't serve your interests all at once. He just can't do it. And the inherent contradictions of capitalism make it so that he can't. And so what does he do most of the time? He just panders. Does this stupid little squint. Says that we stand with you and we're doing our best to try to work through this. Right? And if you're a dumbass, you believe it. Like, he's going to choose money. He's going to choose his own personal wealth and prestige. Right? He's going to choose his own family legacy, right? He's going to go when he's no longer the prime minister, he's going to go work for Exxon or something, right? That's how this goes. And in truth, I actually make the argument that like the Stephen Harper conservatives were better than this guy. Because at least the Stephen Harper conservatives had some kind of attempt at articulating some kind of moral understanding of what was going on, right? That because they profess a type of Christianity that sort of was a lens where they could actually say like, yeah, okay, like free market, rugged capitalism, right? Entrepreneurship, all that kind of stuff, but like we're not gonna throw kids into the street, are we? Like, come on, like really? Like, what would Jesus have to say about that? Right? And if you think they're not talking that way, you are fooling yourself. They do talk that way. And that's why we get the childcare benefit out of the Harper government. Something they never talk about or bring up. Because they know that if they actually do talk about it and the populace actually comes to understand what that is, they'll actually say, well, why don't we just do that? Like, why don't we just have that for everybody? Why are we even talking about homelessness? Why are we even talking about starvation? Why are we even talking about any of that? Like, what you're telling me that you have found a system that you're willing to do for children and the elderly that is completely effective and works 100% of the time, is completely efficient, and you could just bake into the system. Why don't we just do that for everybody? Right? And they know. Like, The conservatives know that it works. They know it's effective. They know it's a system that they could easily implement and they could completely do, and they could do in a heartbeat, right? They know, and how do we know they know? Because they did it for children, right? They drastically reduced child poverty in this country, right? What's Trudeau done on that level ever? Like the CERB, but he immediately dismantled it. Right? And he did it just because it was like, oh, it was a crisis. So he really did it on behalf of capital. And then decided to go after a bunch of people and like claw it back. Which, if you ask me, like all of the people that experienced that clawback actually have like a major class action lawsuit on their hands. Because they could all get together and be like, we accepted this CERB with the understanding that this was going to help us out. Like we didn't understand that there was a clawback part to this. Because it wasn't pitched that way. Right? They just did it because they could, and what are you going to do? Go fuck yourself, you plebs. Right? Instead of going to like Galen Weston, David Thompson, Jim Pattison, and being like, hey, you know that $10 billion that you made during this period of time? Maybe not. Like, come on, we all know how you made that. We know that you're monopolists. We know that you have this kind of this position of prestige and power, but Trudeau's not going to do that because he wants to go to the parties. He wants to put on his blackface and he wants to go sing Deo in front of all of his friends. Like, that's what he wants. So that's what he's going to do. Silverlight, good to see you. So, yeah, Trudeau's not going to become a stronger leader. Like, if anything, he's just getting weaker. He's just getting lamer and lamer and just becoming a bigger loser. Like, any of the early sort of passion that he had is completely gone. And his government is just this lame duck. Like, what have they achieved? What did they do? What legacy exists? In 10 years after he's out of office, we will have forgotten him. People will be like, oh yeah, because he's completely irrelevant. He did nothing for us. Like, nothing. The Harper administration did more for us than he did. That's why I'm not like screaming my head off about Polyev. Like, the liberals want you to. The liberals want you to, like, lose your mind about a Polyev government. Oh, my God, Polyev. Oh, my goodness. And don't get me wrong. Like, he's going to suck. Like, Polyev will suck, right? Of course Polyev will suck. But, like, he's not going to suck worse than Trudeau. And we might actually get something out of it. As opposed to what happened with Trudeau, which was fucking nothing. Meanwhile, we're required to give them 2 weeks' notice. Yeah, right. I will never care about giving 2 weeks' notice after this job. Employers proudly will lie right to your face. It is detestable. Yeah. No, you don't owe them shit. You don't owe these guys anything. Like, we're in the middle of it, like... I will say this until I'm blue in the face. Like, until it's no longer true. Right? Like, if you have ever asked yourself that question, I feel like everybody did when we were like kids and we were learning about the Holocaust and we were learning about World War II and we were learning about that. There was always sort of that question that was coming around that was like, what would you have done? What would you have done? And what would you have done, do you think? What is the thing that you think you would have done? Well, now you know. Like, you do. You know exactly what you would have done. Because you're doing it now. This is what you would have done. You would have gone to work, right? You would have gone out for drinks with your friends, right? You would have come in here, right? You would have done all that kind of stuff. No, Twitch is still running. It just had a little blip, grinning guys. Like, your political leadership would act this way. And you would either be against the genocide or you would be for the genocide, right? And it is going to start ramping up in a big and serious way. Like, it really is. Like, they're not going to just allow this shit to continue happening. They're not going to just allow people to keep gathering en masse. They're not just going to allow people to be on the airwaves. They're just not going to allow it. You can see how it's already happening across Europe. Like, and the narrative is going to be as clear as it can be, right? It's going to be that we're supporting terrorism and Israel has a right to defend itself, and history began October 7th, That's all propaganda, right? If you try to actually talk about the actual history of what's actually going on, then that's all propaganda, right? We're fighting misinformation. Like that, we want to live in a world of truth where we and it'll all be this like Marvel brain, good guy, bad guy thinking, right? And if you refuse to stand up and everything will be like, do you condemn Hamas? Right? That'll be the very first question. Do you or do you not condemn Hamas? Right? And you're going to have the like McCarthy style purges, and you're going to have this kind of stuff. We've already seen it once before during the Ukrainian war. Right? Like I was just watching Lee Camp, and Lee Camp brought it up in one of his videos. He was like, "Yeah, I like lost everything. Like I had my show taken away. I had a YouTube channel that was taken away. I had to start again from the ground up." And he was doing it in the classic like asking for donations kind of thing, like the like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, right? Give some money, all that kind of stuff. Tell people I exist, right? You know that thing that I do? Well, so does he, right? Except when he was doing it, he said, "Just so you guys know, it's only you. Like you are the only thing that is making this thing happen. Your donations is the only thing that's doing it. The ads are not." Any other superfluous thing that you think, any other cash flow that you think is actually making it happen, well, it's not. It is literally just you guys out in the world that are doing it, right? Because what's going to happen to me, and what already happened to Lee Camp and already happened to Chris Hedges and Abby Martin and all of them, is they had their channels taken away. They were demonetized. They're shadow banned. They're not getting ad revenue. That if you talk about Gaza, if you talk about this kind of stuff, they demonetize your videos, right? We're already seeing videos getting taken down. We're already seeing videos getting censored. We're already seeing this stuff happening. It's already happening, and it's just going to ramp up. It's just going to ramp up as the war spreads. Like, and if we elect a Trump or a Poilievre, it's not going to change, right? It's not going to change. So the people on Twitch are saying that the stream isn't working. I don't know, guys. It's the YouTube is working, so you could follow the YouTube. I don't know what's going on with stream on Twitch. Sorry, guys. I think there was just a little blip. Or maybe it's the CIA, right? Maybe it's just that Twitch is like, oh no, here's the algorithm. Yeah. The West is about free speech for saying the N-word. That's what the West is about. The West is about being able to say the N-word. That's what they mean when they're talking about free speech, right? Like the free speech does not extend to commie filth. Right? That's not what they're talking about. That free speech is about our ability to terrorize people. We have the right to terrorize people with violent rhetoric and violent language. But if you stand up and talk about egalitarianism, if you stand up and start talking about hey, why are there homeless people? Right? If you start talking about that kind of thing, well, no, that's are you or are you not a member of the Communist Party? Yeah, Isaac, I got a message on Facebook for posting saying, you have not violated the community rules, but people may not want to see you posting. Right? Like, they're going to literally just say out loud, we just don't want to hear it. Like, that's what it's going to turn into. And they'll say stuff like that. No, you haven't really violated any rules, but we're just not interested. Right? And the argument, like for places like YouTube and Facebook and all this, will be, well, they're privately owned, right? Just go to a different platform, right? Go to a different platform where they allow that kind of thing. Like this is what's going to happen. Like, and it's going to get more hysterical, and it's going to get more hysteria based, and it's going to get more desperate. Right? It's and the reason why it's going to get more desperate is because of what the consequences actually are. Right? So the consequences for the empire. Like, so first of all, let's start about the consequences for the Israelis. Like, the consequences for the Israelis is their eradication. Like, let's be real clear what's going to happen to Israel if America abandons them. right? Hezbollah, Jordan, Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, Yemen, likely Afghanistan, groups in Iraq, probably even Turkey, right? Russia are going to blow the shit out of this place. They're going to blow the shit out of this place. Like, they're going to go in there and they're going to get the IDF and they're going to do trials and they're going to hang people, right? Those are the stakes for Israel. That if Israel loses this conflict, if America decides to back off or whatever, right, then Israel as a state will no longer exist. That's the hard truth, right? That there's no two-state solution anymore. They have crossed lines now. They have crossed lines now. The rest of the world is not going to look at Israel and be like, yeah, two-state solution, good idea, right? This isn't the 70s and the 80s and the 90s anymore. Like, and when I think that this was the bridge too far for the entire rest of the world, was this document right here. When they released their plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza, when they stood up in front of the world with a document and then confirmed that document the next day, and they said, we're ethnically cleansing Gaza. It's happening. Here it is. Here's the document. We admit to it. This is the right thing to do, and we're going to do it. I think the entire rest of the world, I think the entire Middle East, all of Africa, China, Russia, South America, literally just went, oh, okay. So we're fighting Nazis. Like, we're fighting Nazis now. And it's naked. There's no secret. It's not hidden. They're confessing. Like, they're confessing. This is a confession, right? And I do think that it has put some nations in a state of, what do we do? I think that there's a lot of nations that are sitting here being like, well, what are we doing? Like, what do we do? Like, how do we act? How do we actually work in the world now? I think it has changed everything, right? And I think that was the moment that did change everything for everyone. Because it went from like, well, there's a history there, and yeah, something happened in the 40s. There was that big moment, and there's always been tensions there, and there's always these scuffles that happen on the border, and like, yeah, you can point out like the IDF like sniping kids and like all that kind of stuff, and it's like it's brutal, right? It's a tough situation with a long history. There is complexity, and like, yeah, we condemn Hamas and all this kind of stuff, and so on and so forth. But boom, like, it's over. Like, this does change everything. It changes everything in an enormous way. And if you don't think so, then you're a fool. Like, and the entire rest of the world is looking at what's going on here and thinking to themselves, how do we even respond? What are we supposed to do? Like, do we just do neutrality? Do we just be like, oh, that looks like an Israel problem, right? Do we just kind of look back on it and go, oh, okay, but Iran's not doing that. Iran is most definitely saying, this is a problem. We will get involved. If this continues, we are going to get involved. We are going to send arms. We are going to send missiles. We are going to do that kind of thing. And Iran has allies. Big allies. Right? Like, and so that's just from Israel's perspective. Right? So Israel getting wiped off the map. That's the stakes. And those stakes are real. So if you are in Israel standing up against the Zionists and the Zionist project, yeah, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you for even talking about it. If I was in Israel right now, the IDF would be kicking in my door right now. It would be happening, for sure. So what are the stakes for the empire? They're not as drastic. It's not an existential threat for America and the West. but it does mean that their ambitions for world domination are over. If Israel is destroyed, if Israel is wiped out, or even if American influence is removed from Israel, they no longer have the foothold they once had. This is a major foothold in the Middle East. It allows them entrance into lots of sections of the Middle East and Africa that they wouldn't otherwise have. And if they lose this foothold, it's a major setback for the empire, and will likely be seen as a enormous declining moment for the empire. That their withdraw from the Middle East and their withdraw from this place, and so they're going to fight tooth and nail for it. We've already seen how they're willing to sacrifice Ukrainians, right? We've already seen how they're willing to walk Ukrainians down the garden path, pretend as though, yeah, we're here to fight with you and we're always going to protect you and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, here's a bunch of weapons, here's a bunch of money. Send your young men to die. Go on, send an entire generation of Ukrainian citizens to the front line to be blown up by Russians. Absolutely. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, well, okay. Well, you better call for peace. You know the thing that you should have done before you sacrificed an entire generation of Ukrainian young men to the front line of a death cult, right? You should have just sued for peace in the first place, you know. Like it's yeah, if Russia, Gog Magog, attacks Israel, the evangelicals will lose all restraint. Like, as if they have any, right? Like, the only thing that's really restraining, like, really think about how fucked up this is. The only thing that restrains the evangelicals in the United States is the corporate power structure. That it's the corporate power structure that's sitting there being like, well, wait a minute, we can't like go crazy. Like, we can't lose our minds. Like, so it really is like a psychopath and like a doomsday apocalyptic like zealot having a conversation, and the psycho keeps trying to talk down the zealot. Like, that's the conversation that we're seeing. Yeah, Ukraine is sending women into the fight. When they said to the last Ukrainian, they meant it, apparently. Yeah. Well, it's their fight. Like, I don't really know what it's going to take for them to understand. Like, this thing's over. Like, the United States is no longer sending any money. The United States, the State Department has already said out loud that it's time for Ukraine to negotiate peace. Right? Like, they've no longer got support. There are countries around them. I think like Slovakia was the one recently that said they're no longer sending support. Right? The countries around them are just going to stop sending support. Eventually Poland will say it's not sending support anymore. So Ukraine is basically just going to be left alone, and with a neighbor that is just steadily continuing to build up its economic force, and has reserves that it can dip into if it wants to. Right? I think Canada continues support for Ukraine, like, in an existential sort of way, right? But even if it does, like, Canada's not going to be the big turning point. Like, we don't have we're not sitting here with 100 million people, right? We got 40 million people at best, right? And we're in a population decline. We're actually the worst economy in the entire G20, according to the OECD, right? Like, our economy is not the thing. Like, if you're hooking your wagon onto the star, being like, it's Canada will be the thing that pulls us out of this. Yeah, you're desperate. You're in real trouble, right? Like, the Canadian economy is not going to be able to overwhelm the Russian economy. It's not serious. And like, so the question is, how does this come to an end? Right? If the Ukrainians aren't willing to actually come to the table and actually negotiate something, negotiate a ceasefire, negotiate a peace deal, right? How much longer until the Russians basically just say, like, okay, like, we've got the territory that we want, but we need a political resolution, so off to Kiev we go. Right? Like, because once they take Kiev, like, they no longer need to negotiate. And my opinion is the only reason why they haven't done this. I tend to agree with John Mearsheimer, right? And I think his assessment is absolutely correct. They just don't want it. Like, this is a huge pain in the ass for the Russians, and they don't want it. They've got the territory that they want, right? And maybe they'll take a little slice more. Maybe they'll go like a little further more. But the rest of this is like ethnic Ukrainians that don't want the Russians there. Like, nah, what a pain in the ass. Like, forget it. So, but there's got to be a resolution to this, right? And historically, the resolution is you sit down and you say, okay, we're good. Like, it's over now, right? Like, peace deal. And the clown Zelensky is probably not going to be the guy to do it. That there'll probably be some other guy that comes in and finally says, okay, like, we gotta negotiate peace here, right? Because the clown Zelensky is a big reason why this all happened. That if Ukraine had a real leader during this period of time, that leader would have had the Russians invade their borders and been like, whoa, 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 right? Like, this is this mindset, this like pro-war mindset, and it really shows that your capitalist leaders are actually just detached psychos for the most part. Like, Zelensky is not really affected by this war. Right? He doesn't live on the front. He doesn't live where the war is, right? Like, he doesn't like he looks at it through paperwork, right? But it doesn't really matter to him. And he's siphoning money off the top as it's going on, right? Like, he's made a lot of money during this period of time. Like, in my opinion, the reason why he wants the war to continue is because it keeps enriching him. Because he's getting richer. Like, that's all. So he's definitely not the guy who's going to come in and negotiate peace, because he's making money hand over fist as long as the war continues. Like, every single time he stands up and says, Ukraine needs money. Ukraine needs money. What he is actually saying is, I need money. Because that's what's actually happening. Right? Like, some of that money goes to weapons, and some of that money makes it to the front, and some of that money gets used for that kind of stuff. Sure, but it's enriching him. Like, Zelensky's incredibly corrupt. And he's a clown. He always was a clown. Yeah, Zelensky did a telethon recently for Ukraine, right? Like, that's where it's going down to. Like he's gonna do a he's gonna stand in front of people and be like, just call the number down below on the screen you see there, send money to help the Ukrainian. Like. It's over, dude. Like he's doing like telethons. You're doing like a telethon in the face of like the third largest economy on the planet. Like, you're good. Like, you're over. Like, it's time to tap out. Like, it is. It's time to tap out. Like, all you're doing is killing Ukrainians for nothing. Well, for your own personal wealth. Like, let's call it for what it is. Like, Zelensky is murdering his own citizens for his own personal wealth. That's what he is actually doing. And we're just letting him. This is fine. Right? June, good to see you. I think we can gain the support and recognition of neighboring countries by offering various territorial concessions to them. Northern Ireland to Ireland, the Channel Islands, British Antarctica, territory to France. I mean, I'm not sure what that is in reference to. Like, I mean, if you're are you talking about Ukraine? Because if you're talking about Ukraine, like, the reality is, like, this section belongs to Russia now. Like, that's not even really up for debate. Like, that's not even a negotiation. Only really detached, delusional people think that this is going to somehow go back to being Ukrainian. That's over. This belongs to Russia. And that's true whether or not Ukraine agrees to it or not. Like, that's just... June says, I'm referring to the creation of a trans-ethno-state in Great Britain. Nope, June, I don't understand what you're talking about. Sorry. What are you talking about? Yeah, YouTube blocking messages. Nothing new there. Putin already stated that Odessa is the deal breaker of the war. Like, are you talking about the like, again, I don't really know what you're referencing there. Like, are you referencing like the massacre that happened there, and that's what made him move in? Or are you talking about like this is the deal breaker in regards to like a peace treaty? Yeah, no, talk about Trudeau. Like fuck Trudeau, right? Like Trudeau's a clown. Like he's not doing what needs to be done. He's refusing to actually stand up for what the majority of Canadians want. He's refusing to actually say out loud that we should be calling for a ceasefire. Like, he's a coward. That's all. Like, we don't have real leadership in Canada at all. Like, we don't actually have leaders. We've just got these total cowards who are... I've seen some people from the NDP standing up and calling for a ceasefire, but there was that one woman who called for a ceasefire and got kicked out of the NDP. So... as usual, the NDP sending this incredible mixed message to everybody. Nobody knows what they stand for anymore because, like most of these capitalists, they don't stand for anything, right? Like, it's a sad, pathetic state of affairs. Like, and what the most embarrassing part about it, near as I can tell, is that it's all for nothing. Like, it's all for nothing. Like, who cares? Like, why are we having this war? Like, why are we doing any of this? What's the point of it? Like we could just not. We could just simply not. But we're going to do it. We're just a bunch of losers. Eric writes, it's the deal breaker for a peace treaty. Once he takes over Odessa, Ukraine becomes a landlocked country, and all the Ukraine missiles is going to be far away to hit any of his territories. Yeah. I mean, not that Ukraine has like a hope in hell. Like, Ukraine's not really, like, yes, taking Odessa would make it landlocked, but it's not like Ukraine has a big, like, presence compared to what Russia can field into the Black Sea. Right? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like Ukraine is, like, getting like lots of support from Turkey. You know, it's not like Ukraine is getting like huge Georgian support. Bulgaria sending in lots of stuff, right? Like Russia has control of the Black Sea. Like, they have control of Crimea. They've got control of a major military base here. They've got control of the Black Sea. In terms of trade, that would be pretty devastating, I think, for the Ukrainian economy and for Ukraine. Like, Putin's and Russia's strategy moving forward, right? Once some sort of deal is struck and once some sort of agreement is reached, is very clearly to just strangle these guys, right? It's just to crunch in and just go. Like, he wants Ukraine to essentially become a vassal of Russia. Like Canada is a vassal of the United States, right? Which I don't, like, that's not crazy. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, can you believe that the Russians want Ukraine to be a vassal of Russia? Can you believe it? Like, yeah, I can believe it. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I don't hold it against them. I think that that's pretty normal. I think it's normal for big, gigantic, superpowers, right, to look at the neighboring countries and think to themselves, yeah, we would love it if you guys were buffer states. We would really love it if you guys were just like chilling out, being buffer states. We don't need to integrate you. We don't need you to be part of Russia. We don't need you to be part of the kind of thing. You can have your own elections and do your own stuff and all that kind of stuff, but you're a buffer state and you exist as that. Right? What do you think Mongolia is? What do you think Kazakhstan is? Right? You think that China is sitting there being like, we got to make sure that Mongolia is part of the greater Chinese? Like, no, because they're looking at Russia going, yeah, buffer state. Like, it's bad enough that they got this going on. Right? Like, big giant countries and big giant powers want buffer states. They want that. Right? Like, if you watch Star Trek The Next Generation, right? Star Trek Next Generation, there was always this concept of the neutral zone, right? There was always sort of just this concept, and usually it was when they were dealing with the Romulans, right? there's this concept of the neutral zone, where no, we're going to have a territory that is neutral. That the territory itself, that sure, there can be people in that territory, but they are going to be unaligned. They're not going to be part of the Romulan Empire, and they're not going to be part of the Federation, and we're just going to agree to those terms because it's good for our relations. It's just good for our relations as nations that are kind of like a little with one another, right? Like the Cold War period was essentially the United States and Russia just being like, and it's good. It's good to have a neutral zone, to have just a barrier so that everybody's a little bit like, okay. And it's a way for big powers to say, hey, if you cross into that neutral zone territory with military force or with military arms, it's not an invasion of our territory, but we're going to take it as an invasion of our territory. We take it as a threat. Like, we take it as a way for us to say, whoa, bear, hold on, what are you doing? Stop. And that's completely reasonable and completely rational. That when this whole thing started in Ukraine and people were pretending as though the Russians should have been totally cool with the idea of Ukraine joining NATO, I was like, you guys are fucking lunatics. That's the stupidest shit I've ever heard of in my life, right? I would feel the same way if the Russians were saying that Ukraine should be part of, like, I think that NATO and the European would have every reason to be like, whoa, yeah, Ukraine being part of Russia, whoa, right? Because you need a neutral zone. You should have that. That's just, to me, that's just completely reasonable. And I don't know why anybody would ever be against this idea. That like, and the thing that kind of shocks me the most is, like, if I'm a Ukrainian with the understanding of the situation that I'm in, given the geopolitics of the situation, I am definitely going to be sitting there being like, yeah, we should be neutral. Like, we shouldn't be picking. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You got a monster on this side, right? You got a monster on this side that used to literally be Nazis, right? And then you got a giant monster on this side that has shown it's perfectly capable of fielding a military to be able to destroy everything. And what it's saying over here is be neutral, right? And everything's totally chill. Just be neutral, and everything's going to be totally chill, and we'll trade, and everything will be fine, right? But then this guy comes along and says, hey, why don't you join forces with us? What are you talking about? Like, what are you absolutely fucking talking about? like, holy fucking shit. Holy fucking shit. Like, and June's point, like, neutral, but I'm in charge. Like, obviously, and again, I'll say it again, obviously Russia wants Ukraine to be in a subservient status. Like, obviously. They want them to be something of a junior partner. Like, that's obviously true. But that's not new, shocking, or even offensive to anybody with even a little bit of a brain about how geopolitics actually works. Like, oh no, Moscow wants to trade with its neighbor. Oh, geez, Russia is sitting there going, yeah, Ukraine produces a lot of food and there's natural resources in Ukraine. We'd love to have access to that and be able to trade and have someone who's sympathetic with the Russian situation in Ukraine who's willing to actually do that. Yeah, whoa, what an outrageous idea. Like, the only people who are offended by that idea are Russophobes, are people who are like, the Russians are mongrels, right? Like, that's completely normal. That's the relationship between Canada and the United States. That's the relationship the United States wants with Mexico. That's the relationship that literally any country wants with literally any other neighboring country, right? That's the relationship China wants with Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, South Korea, North Korea, Japan, Mongolia. It's the relationship, the Philippines. It's the relationship that any country wants with its neighboring countries. Why? Because that's safe. Because there's peace there. Because that means that, we get to amicably trade with one another, we can support one another, but we don't need to say that we are a federated body working together to pursue a collective interest against the rest of the world. Like we can be neighborly without creating a fucking giant empire, right? Because, like, fundamentally, what would that mean for the entire rest of the world if Russia was to turn to Ukraine and be like, be neutral, bro. You are neutral and everything's chill, right? And we'll trade and be amicable and all that kind of stuff. Well, it means that the Russian line ends here. That's the border for Russia, and it's not going any further. It's not going anywhere. Similarly, where's the line for NATO? Right there. Where's it going? Nowhere. Right? It's not going that way. Right? And it's a way to basically just prevent empire. To just stop the spread of empire and to just say, this is it. We've done it. Here it is. Border. And the next neighbor over, neutral, and then whatever goes on the other side of that border, right? Not our business. Like, we'll negotiate, we'll talk to you, right? We'll come to agreements and all that kind of stuff. Trade is peace. We'd like to interact with the world, but we're not coming over there. Not interested. Line has been drawn. Here's a neutral zone. And yeah, of course we want that neutral zone to also be friendly with us. Like, I just don't think that I'm saying anything outrageous here. And yet it feels like when I talk to NATO people, they're just losing their minds about the idea that this exists. And I'm like, why? And the only response that they can come up with is that Russia should trust us when we're putting military bases on its border. Like, that's wild. It's a wild, wild, wild idea. It's a wild, wild, wild idea. Yeah, why should countries have nukes? Yeah. I mean, the nuclear question is a big one. That's a Pandora's box right there, man. Like, tough shit. Countries have nukes. It's over. Like, the genie's out of the bottle. Like, the best we'll ever do with that one is reduce the amount of nukes in play. That's it. Reagan was doing that for a little period of time. There were discussions about that. That was happening. It was the Bush administration that started ramping that back up, right? Because we're a psychotic death cult. We can't help ourselves. And but there was like a moment where we were like, less nuclear bombs just lying around. We should. There was a system. There was a process of disarmament that was beginning, but we will never get to a point where there's zero of these ever again. That's just never going to happen, because every nation, like, take a look at the Ukrainian situation. I think the Ukrainian conflict, the Ukrainian war, the Donbass war, really affirmed, I think, to the superpowers, at least, like the superpowers of the world, that, like, yeah, we're going to hang on to these nukes. Like, the reason why there was never any serious consideration about pushing the Russians into this border and encroaching on this border is because Russia has nukes. Like, that's it. Like, oh, well, we can't unleash that genie. Like, we can't go there, right? So it's a constant and perpetual, like, rattle that you get to shake. And if I'm a Russian, after this conflict, I'm going to be like, nuclear. Like, I'm not disarming. That's not happening. It's a major, major deterrent. You take a look at a country like Iran. Even just the suspicion that Iran has nukes is a major deterrent. Even just the, like, it isn't actually confirmed whether or not Iran has nuclear missiles or not, right? Iran keeps denying it, but there's all of this speculation around. Well, that speculation is enough. It's enough to make it so that, like, yeah, like, full-scale invasion into Iran. We just watched this region go through 20, 30 years of just full-scale war. Afghanistan getting blown up, Iraq getting destroyed, Syria, the Syrian war, right? Pakistan having major conflicts, literally genocide happening in Yemen and Oman, major uprisings all throughout Egypt during this period of time, a fascist government taking over in Turkey, just this enormous major conflict in the region, and Iran stood. Nuclear. You're not convincing people to disarm. That's not happening. That's never happening. Not in my lifetime. Not in the next generation's lifetime, for sure. Like, maybe we can get to a place where we can actually start talking about disarmament, right? And you've got another story over here, North Korea. Why can't they get in there? Why can't they do that? Why can't they go? They've got nukes. They're constantly shaking that. Why can't the Americans get in there and start invading and start bombing campaigns again? Because they got nukes. Remember that thing that happened in Hawaii not that long ago? Where they were like, the nukes are flying. The nukes are flying. Oh my God, it's a big nuclear kind of thing. Like the air raid sirens were going, all that kind of crazy stuff, right? Well, it's because they fucking have nukes. And North Korea is rebuilding itself, and it feels a lot safer. Why? Because it can shake a nuke in your face. Like, mutually assured destruction is a legitimate policy where the United States understands. Like, if it actually steps foot into North Korea, pick a city. Which one? It's gone. Pick the city. And then you get to be the leader, and you get to be the president that gets known for having San Francisco get nuked. Or even like Honolulu or any of these get nuked. Like, it's on the table. And the United States is the one that keeps pushing that forward and pressing that forward and pressing that button. And so it's forcing everybody else to just be like, okay, like if Jason Voorhees was running around in your house, right? If this guy was stomping around in your house, just mercilessly stabbing people to death, and you were watching it happen, and you heard the screams happening in your house, and you had a little button, right? That was like on a chain on your chest. And what the button did is that it blew up the entire house. You and Jason would get blown to smithereens. And then Jason comes into the room covered in blood, hockey mask, just glistening red. He's got a machete and he's wielding it right in front of you. And you go, right in front of him. And he stops. And you go, and he's looking at you. And then he just turns around and walks out of the room. You going to get rid of that button? Nah. You're going to hold on to that button for dear life. And you're going to stay in your room, right? You're going to build up your defenses. You're going to do what you want to do, right? And maybe you hear another scream off of the kind of thing, right? Maybe you got a walkie-talkie call from somebody, right? And maybe you can get a button for them too, right? So that when Jason comes into the room, they can go, because there's fucking Jason Voorhees stomping around doing whatever it wants. And that's the fucking United States of America. So yeah. Nukes are in play and they're never going to stop being in play. Why? Because Jason Voorhees is going around massacring people. And it's really obvious that that's what's happening. If NATO and Russia had done the same amount of work as Portugal and Spain to resolve their differences, I mean, like, I think that Russia has been trying to do, or had at least been trying to do that. I don't think that NATO is being very honest. Like, I think that NATO is being pretty disingenuous the entire time. That Russia, I think, after World War II, did have the genuine, like, they abandoned their project of communism, right? They abandoned the idea of the Soviet Union. They erected a neutral zone. They stepped down in big and major ways, right? The Russians stepped down in big and major ways, and I think that they were doing it specifically in order to find a peaceful path forward. Right, to not antagonize their neighbors, to not antagonize these fucking fascist Nazis, right? To try to be amicable and try to find a peaceful way forward. And for a little while, it looked like it might happen, right? It like really pays to remember that when Putin came to power, like he went around and like shook hands with all the world leaders and all of the European leaders. He was shaking hands with them and glad handing. He was part of the G8. That was a thing that was actually happening, right? Like there was a good deal of integration that seemed to be happening. I think Libya was what did it. I think Libya was the moment where Putin finally was like, "That's not real. That's not a real thing. This is not a defensive pact. This is Nazism 2.0, and it is only a matter of time before it turns on us." And it eventually did. Like it eventually did. Yep, Russia wanted to join NATO. That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the trouble is that if you don't actually have NATO, right? If you don't actually have NATO, then the European powers will fight amongst themselves. That's the real truth. That NATO exists as a way for the European powers to try to peacefully interact, and so too with the EU, by the way. That these institutions and these organizations exist so that these powers will not fight amongst themselves. And if you were to dissolve NATO or dissolve the EU or any of that kind of stuff, well, war follows shortly behind. Because that's how these guys talk to one another. Like that's how this works. Right? It's not like the history of Europe is peaceful. It's not like the history of Europe is sitting there being hunky-dory, friends in hands together, right? Like these guys are fucking genocidal maniacs. The only time they actually sit down and organize with one another is when they want to colonize a place, right? When they actually want to colonize a place and they actually want to take over a place and they go like, wow, there's a big territory there. How about instead of fighting, we just sit down and organize, and you get this piece Germany and you get this piece France and you get this piece Britain, and we don't need to fight. Right? That's the only time they actually are amicable with one another. Right? Except for right now in this, like for fuck's sake, there was a period of time where France and Britain were in 100 years war. like these guys want to fight one another. They just you think the soccer hooliganism is like you think that's just play time? Like, that's that warlike aggression where they want to go to war with one another, and they're expressing that feeling of war through soccer, of all things. Like, and rugby and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, you think that you think they're playing? Like, you think that's just phony? You think that's all good-natured? So if NATO was to go away, and I understand the position of the rest of the world, I think the rest of the world would like to see NATO go away. Right, because NATO is clearly an aggressive military pact where they destroy countries. Like they destroyed Yugoslavia, they destroyed Libya, right? They invaded Iraq together, right? Like it's very, very clearly a. Well, sorry, they didn't invade Iraq together. That was Tony Blair that did that. But it's not a defensive pact. It's a military pact, where they go into nations that they want to go into and they destroy them. But if it was to go away, and I think that the rest of the world will like to see that happen, right? It means that there'll be a war in Europe within 10 years. Like, it's just how they are. Nukes will become obsolete eventually once they develop a real biological weapon or neutron bomb that can eradicate unwanted people and leave the structures intact. If you ask me, Silverlight, I think that the nuclear bomb goes beyond like it's a propaganda thing more than anything. It's a perception thing more than anything. It's not just the destruction. Like, we've got weapons that are just as destructive. Like, even during World War II, like you could drop a bomb on a place that was made out of TNT that would be just as destructive, right? It's the mushroom cloud. It's the vision of it. It's the irradiation of it. It's the environmental damage. Like there's so much tied up into it. It's so evocative. There's so much there, and if we are to start if we use nuclear bombs in a place, like using nuclear bombs is like, it evokes something feral. It's deeper. It goes beyond like just, it's the thing that makes the statement. That's what it is. And it's not rational. Like I said, like if it was just about destruction, come on, they've got like hyper thermal missiles and shit. They've got like bunker buster, like absolutely just tear out a mountain shit. Like they don't need a nuke, right? Yeah. My main point is that they're going to upgrade before disarming. Oh yeah, all right. We have new technology that allows us to blow up one another. Allows us to blow up one another before without irradiating the environment. These are green missiles. These are green thermonuclear missiles. This is good for the environment. Oh my god. You know what? I've been wanting to read this one. I'm going to go use the washroom, guys, and I'll be right back. You know, I do gotta say, I'm so glad that I'm talking to you guys. It is actually like a weight off my chest. Talking to you guys about this kind of stuff, it lets me get this weight off my chest. Yep. World War I was only possible because Europe had completely colonized the rest of the world, and there were the major developments in industry, technology, commerce, population, etc., and also the will to do it. Like, they just want to fight one another. All right. I really want to read this article because it's insane. Like, this article should dispel from your mind any idea that you have that the ruling class, the billionaire class, are anything other than completely psychotic, right? And it's the banalness of this article. It's the sort of banality by which these things are said that really astounds me. Peter Thiel is from The Atlantic. Peter Thiel is taking a break from democracy. It's one of his many, many disappointments, by Barton Gellman. How's that for a name? Barton Gellman. It wasn't clear at first why Peter Thiel agreed to talk to me. He is, famously, no friend of the media. But Thiel, co-founder of PayPal and Palantir, avatar of techno-libertarianism, bogeyman of the left, consented to a series of long interviews at his home and office in Los Angeles. He was more open than I expected him to be, and he had a lot to say. Oh, hold on. I think I got to do something here. It's doing that annoying thing. As if we don't have these workarounds. Like, But the impetus for these conversations, he wanted me to publish a promise he was going to make so that he would not be tempted to go back on his word. And what was the thing he needed to say loudly? that he wouldn't be giving any money to any politician, including Donald Trump, in the next presidential campaign. Already he has endured the wrath of Trump. Thiel tried to duck Trump's calls for a while, but in late April, the former president managed to get him on the phone. Trump reminded Thiel that he had backed two of Thiel's protégés, Blake Masters and J.D. Vance, in their Senate races last year. Thiel had given each of them more than $10 million. Now Trump wanted Thiel to give the same to him. When Thiel declined, Trump told me that he was very, very sad to hear that, Thiel recounted. He had expected way more of me, and that's how the call ended. Months later, word got back to Thiel that Trump had called Masters to discourage him from running for Senate again, and had called Thiel a fucking scumbag. Thiel's hope was that this article would lock me into not giving any money to Republican politicians in 2024, he said. There's always a chance I might change my mind, but by talking to you, it makes it hard for me to change my mind. My husband doesn't want me to give them any more money, and he's right. I know they're going to be pestering me like crazy, and by talking to you, it's going to lock me out for the cycle for 2024. This matters because of Thiel's unique role in the American political ecosystem. He is the techiest of tech evangelists, the purest distillation of Silicon Valley's reigning ethos. As such, he has become the embodiment of a strain of thinking that is pronounced and growing amongst tech founders. And why does he want to cut off politicians? It's not that they are as mediocre as individuals and therefore incapable of bringing about the kinds of civilization-defining changes a man like him would expect to see. His disappointment runs deeper than that. Their failure to make the world conform to his vision has soured him on the entire enterprise, to the point where he no longer thinks it matters very much who wins the next election. Not for the first time, Peter Thiel has lost interest in democracy. So for clarity, for those following at home, Peter Thiel is no longer interested in democracy because his delusional vision of how the world should work cannot be manifested through that process. Because the trouble, as Peter Thiel sees it, is not that his vision is psychotic and absurd and anti-human, but that the politicians and the systems are what's at fault. Let's continue. Thiel's decision to endorse Trump at the Republican National Convention in 2016 surprised some of his closest friends. Thiel has cultivated an image as a man of ideas, an intellectual who studied philosophy with René Girard and owns first editions of Leo Strauss in English and German. Trump quite obviously did not share these interests or Thiel's libertarian principles. But 4 months earlier, Thiel had seen an omen. On March 18th, 2016, a jury delivered an extraordinary $115 million verdict to Hulk Hogan in his invasion of privacy lawsuit against Gawker Media, whose website had published portions of a sex tape featuring Hogan. Thiel had secretly funded the litigation against Gawker, which had mocked him for years and outed him as gay. The verdict drove the company out of business. For Thiel, the outcome was more than a vindication. It was a sign. When the jury came back, my instant reaction at that point was, wow, maybe Trump wins the election. He told me. In his mind, Gawker was a stand-in for the media writ large, hostile to the presumptive Republican nominee. Hogan was a Trump-like figure, and the jury, the voters, had taken his side. So Thiel's omen is like the most petty shit ever. Like, Gawker is a scummy organization that, yeah, is like making fun of him and like outing him as gay, right? But he's like a billionaire, right? And so his big sign is to why to join politics is that I can do petty shit. I can get my way and push people around and punish those who have wronged me. Like Batman, I am vengeance. Thiel himself had not yet publicly embraced Trump. In the Republican primary, he had backed Carla Fiorina, the former Hewlett-Packard CEO, and a fellow Stanford alum with a $2 million contribution. Though his candidate had lost, he planned to attend the RNC as a delegate. Then came a call from Donald Trump Jr. Thiel had never met father or son, and had yet to give money to Trump's campaign, but the younger Trump had noticed his name on the delegate list. The convention was 10 days away, and Trump was short on high-profile endorsements. "Do you want to speak?" Don Jr. asked. Thiel thought, it might be fun. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? I'll try to shape the world in my image. It'll be fun. He sounded out his old friend Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, who has since become his political nemesis. We were talking, and he said, I'm considering going and giving a speech at the Republican National Convention, Hoffman recalled. And I laughed, thinking he was joking, right? And it was like, no, I'm not joking. Because it is a joke. Peter Thiel is a joke. A cruel, sadistic joke. For years, Thiel had been saying that he generally favored the more pessimistic candidate in any presidential race, because if you're too optimistic, it just shows you're out of touch. He scorned the rote optimism of politicians who, echoing Ronald Reagan, portrayed America as a shining city on a hill. Trump's America, by contrast, was a broken landscape under siege. Thiel is not against government in principle. His friend, Aaron Hoffman, who is no relation to Reid, says, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, which had massive, crazy amounts of power, he admires because it was effective. We built the Hoover Dam. We did the Manhattan Project, Hoffman told me. We started the space program. So, I love that in the middle of this article is essentially an indictment of free market capitalism. Just free market capitalism fails. We were much more powerful when we were using governmental force through taxation, right? But the days when great men could achieve great things in government are gone, Thiel believes. As we go forward, it's the inability to be self-aware. Right? It's the inability for this guy to be self-aware that the reason why people in positions of power in government no longer wield that power effectively is because of people like Peter Thiel. That Peter Thiel wants them to conform to this other vision of free market capitalism that fails and doesn't work. And his big complaint is that it failed and it doesn't work. But instead of saying, oh man, my vision failed and it didn't work, he says the system that's supposed to manifest it is what's the problem, even though his very existence and his manipulation within that system is the reason it didn't work. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy and he's unaware of it. It's incredible to see. It's incredible that there's this multi-billionaire who is just absolutely deluded out of his mind that thinks that the reason why my failed ideology failed is because democracy doesn't work. But the days when great men could achieve great things in government are gone, Thiel believes. He disdains what the federal apparatus has become, rule-bound, stifling of innovation, a senile central-left regime, which is what you paid for. His libertarian critique of American government has curdled into an almost nihilistic impulse to demolish it. Make America Great Again was the most pessimistic slogan of any candidate in 100 years, because you were saying that we are no longer a great country, Thiel told me, and that was a shocking slogan for a major presidential candidate. He thought people needed to hear it. Thiel gave $1.25 million to the Trump campaign and had an office in Trump Tower during the transition, where he suggested candidates for jobs in the coming administration. His protege, Michael Kreisios, was named Chief Technology Officer, but few of Thiel's other candidates got jobs. Voting for Trump was like a not very articulate scream for help, Thiel told me. He fantasized that Trump's election would somehow force a national reckoning. He believed somebody needed to tear things down, slash regulations, crush the administrative state, before the country could rebuild. He admits now that it was a bad bet. Isn't it awesome how we've just given these people billions of dollars? Isn't that really great? How we've just handed billions of dollars over to these like total narcissistic losers who actually think that their vision for how things should be is better than just like taking that money and giving it to homeless people. Like, what if Peter Thiel just gave this money, right? What if Peter Thiel just gave this money to the poor, right? What if he just gave it to poor people? He just walked out and was like, here, poor people living in tents in my city, have money. Nah, can't be done, right? I earned it, right? They need to work hard. Meg Yar guy on Twitch, he's getting his libertarian small government world, yet this bores him because there's no real change. Yeah, like, because he's insulated. He's insulated from the entire rest of the world. Nothing matters to him. Like, and this article will get into the things that matter to him, and it's psychotic. This article actually convinced me as we're moving forward. The reason why I really wanted to read this article, guys, this is the real reason. If you are a longtime listener, you know that I believe in, or I've been articulating the unholy trinity of the capitalist death cult, the worship of money, the worship of self, and I've been really struggling with the third prong. Really been struggling with what that third prong actually is titled. Like, I know what it is, but I've been struggling with it. This article finally convinced me. I know what it is. It's the worship of chaos. This is the worship of chaos. Peter Thiel is a chaos death knight, and it'll become extremely obvious as we go forward. Reid Hoffman, who has known Thiel since college, long ago noticed a pattern in his old friend's way of thinking. Time after time, Thiel would espouse grandiose, utopian hopes that failed to materialize, leaving him kind of furious or angry about the world's unwillingness to bend to whatever vision was possessing him at the moment. Peter tends to not be glass is half empty, but glass is fully empty, Hoffman told me. Isn't it great that there's a billionaire death knight walking around who's like a nihilist saying, I can't wait to destroy democracy because it's not doing what I want? Disillusionment was a recurring theme in my conversations with Thiel. He is worth between $4 billion and $9 billion. He lives with his husband and 2 children in a glass palace in Bel Air that has 9 bedrooms and a 90-foot infinity pool. He is a titan of Silicon Valley and a conservative kingmaker. Yet he tells the story of his life as a series of disheartening setbacks. This guy is a total fucking loser. Just an amazing loser. Like, he's at the top of the hierarchy, and it's not enough. Because everything he has ever done is pointless. Because you don't find success outside, you find it inside. And Peter Thiel likely doesn't know who he is. Born in Germany, the son of a mining engineer, Thiel, oh God, born in Germany. How much you want to bet that guy's a Nazi? Huh? Who wants to do the research? Peter Thiel, son of a Nazi? Who wants to guess? The son of a mining engineer, probably worked in World War II, right? He was the one that was building the tanks. Thiel lived briefly in Southwest Africa, modern day Namibia. Apartheid baby? Apartheid baby? Huh? Son of a Nazi. Grew up in apartheid South Africa. Huh? Who wants to do the research? But grew up primarily in Ohio and California. After graduating from Stanford and then Stanford Law, he worked briefly on the East Coast before heading back to Silicon Valley. In 1998, Thiel teamed up with Max Levchin, a brilliant computer scientist, and together they founded the company that became PayPal, with the declared purpose of creating a libertarian alternative to government currency. That grand ambition went unfulfilled, but PayPal turned out to be a terrific way to pay for online purchases, which were growing exponentially. In 2002, eBay bought the company for $1.5 billion. So, classic, government-funded program, the internet. Let's saddle onto the side of this massive government-funded infrastructure program and just write the code, basically, for how to do online transactions, and we're billionaires, right? I've never seen a clearer example of right place, right time in my life, right? All based on government funding in the first place. In 2004, Thiel co-founded Palantir Technologies, a private intelligence firm that does data mining for government and private clients at home and abroad. The CIA's venture capital arm, called In-Q-Tel, was his first outside investor. So he's a spook, right? This is how he makes his money, by spying on all of us, right? He's data mining, right? There's probably a Peter Thiel-funded bot in our chat right now, data mining us right now. Right? Isn't that great? June, thanks to the research. Peter Thiel's father was born in 1938, so when Hitler shot himself, he would have been about 7 years old. Grandfather, June? Come on, grandfather. Let's go all the way, June. Who was Peter Thiel's grandfather? Let's go. For clarity, I'm not actually serious about this, but it's just funny. This was also actually, you know what? I am actually serious about this. Who is Peter Thiel's grandfather? Peter Thiel's grandfather was in Germany when the Nazis were in power. Who's this guy? This was also the year he placed the most celebrated wager in the history of venture capital. He met Mark Zuckerberg, liked what he heard, and became Facebook's first outside investor. Yeah, what a gamble. Let's spend some money on an internet phone book. What a gamble. $500,000 bought him 10% of the company, most of which he cashed out for about $1 billion in 2012. He came to regret the sale, however. At Facebook's market peak in 2021, his stake would have been worth many times more. Oh, poor baby. Thiel made some poor investments, losing enormous sums by going long on the stock market in 2008 when it nosedived, and then shorting the market in 2009 when it rallied. But on the whole, he has done exceptionally well. Alex Karp, his Palantir co-founder, who agrees with Thiel on very little other than business, calls him the world's best venture investor. Thiel told me that this is indeed his ambition, and he hinted that he may have achieved it, but his dreams have always been much, much bigger than that. He longs for a world in which great men are free to work their will on society, unconstrained by government or regulation or redistributionist economics that would impinge on their wealth and power, or any obligation, really, to the rest of humanity. I'm going to read that again so that it really sinks in that this guy's a fascist, an obvious God complex, dictator type. He longs for a world in which great men, that's of course him, right? Because all of his wealth he earned, and it wasn't because of massive government programs and good timing on the part of the universal forces that swirl around him. No, he did it himself because he's super smart. He longs for a world in which great men are free to work their will on society, unconstrained by, let me rephrase this and get away from the idea of government, right? And say it for what it is. Unconstrained by people, plebs, serfs, servants, wage slaves, or rules, or egalitarian ideas like we should give a shit about one another, right? That would impinge on their wealth and power. Like, imagine if, King Henry VIII said this. I long for a world in which great men are free to work their will on society, unconstrained by unions and guilds, or welfare of the poor that would impinge on my wealth and power, or any obligation, really, to the rest of humanity, Like, this is psychotic. This is psychopath thinking. This is a worship of chaos at the highest possible level. That rich, powerful people should be allowed to do what they want because they're rich and powerful. This person is a psychopath. He should have his wealth stripped. We should not permit rich people to exist. This article is literally all the evidence that you need to see for the proof of that. He longs for radical new technologies and scientific advances on a scale most of us can hardly imagine. He takes for granted that this kind of progress will redound to the benefit of society at large. More than anything, he longs to live forever. Thiel does not believe death is inevitable. Calling death a law of nature is, in his view, just an excuse for giving up. It's something we are told that demotivates us from trying harder, he said. He has spent enormous sums trying to evade his own end, but feels that, if anything, he should devote even more time and money to solving the problem of human mortality. So Peter Thiel wants to stand up against God, that the laws of creation have stood up in front of Peter Thiel, a great man, and said, the rules are that you are here for a while and then you die. And Peter Thiel, instead of doing things like giving money to the poor, helping anybody, has decided that, no, what I want to do is what matters the most, and what I want to do is live forever in the face of God. Like, this is some Faustian shit right here. This is some, like, high-level, like, Faust stuff. Making bargains with evil forces in order to flaunt your power in the face of God. Yeah, Silverlight. Oh, that's great. It gets worse. Yeah, it can always get worse, baby. Thiel grew up reading a great deal of science fiction and fantasy. Henlin, Asimov, Clarke, but especially Tolkien. He has said that he read the Lord of the Rings trilogy at least 10 times. Tolkien's influence on his worldview is obvious. Middle-earth is an arena of struggle for ultimate power, largely without government, where extraordinary individuals rise to fulfill their destinies. Also, there are immortal elves who live apart from men in a magical sheltered valley. Like, you might as well be talking about Harry Potter right now, you know? Like, you might as well be like, he read a lot of Harry Potter. Yes, Harry Potter really did alter my... Did his dream of eternal life trace to the Lord of the Rings, I wondered? Yes, Thiel said, perking up. There are all these ways where trying to live unnaturally long goes haywire in Tolkien's works. But you also have the elves. And then there are sort of all these questions, you know? How are the elves different from the humans in Tolkien? And they're basically, I think the main difference is just they're humans that don't die. So why can't we be elves? I asked. Thiel nodded reverently, his expression a blend of hope and chagrin. Why can't we be elves? He said. Because you don't live in a fantasy world, you dumb fuck. Because this isn't a world of fantasy. This isn't a world of magic and elves and dwarves and dragons and Sauron and orcs and shit and wizards, literal wizards, you dumb fucking loser. You moronic, detached, psychopathic billionaire. We live in the real world where we are humans. Why can't we be elves? Because magic isn't real. You dumb fuck. This is no different than someone reading the Bible and believing that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment to split up us from the Muslims, and the white Americans are going to be living in heaven while everyone else burns in hell. This guy literally read Lord of the Rings, and in many ways it's worse because we know who the author is, and we know that he wasn't a magical wizard, he was just a dude, right? And he read it and he went, maybe magic could be real. And he's sitting there with billions of dollars pursuing this manic idea that maybe I'll live forever unlike everything else that's ever existed. We should take these people's money away. We should take these people's money away. There should simply not be billionaires at all. Because if this guy was a regular dude, and he walked into a room where we're all sitting there making decisions together as equals in an egalitarian setting, and he said, why can't we be elves? The rest of us would go, because we're fucking humans. Because we live in reality. Where there's no such thing as magic, you dumb fucking loser. No, we're not going to spend billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars to pursue your manic idea that maybe we can attain eternal life. It's never backfired ever in the history of humanity. There's no such thing as hubris. There hasn't been thousands of cautionary tales. There isn't like a well-known, well-regarded cautionary tale by the name of Faust that's specifically about this that we shouldn't pay any attention to. No. Instead of actually taking care of our needy and our sick and our poor and ourselves, in fact, instead of actually taking care of our environment, instead of actually taking care of anything, what we should do is we should take all of our resources and funnel it into this idea of creating a machine that'll make us live forever. Because this place is super great, right? This guy is a child that's afraid of death. That's all it is. He's just afraid of his creator. He's afraid of dying because he knows he's a loser that's accomplished nothing, really, right? He wrote some code that let people transfer money from one place to another when the internet was starting, and it made him a billionaire, and he's sitting there being like, I must be the greatest! And he's realizing how impotent he is. How impotent and pathetic he is, and how nothing he does actually matters because he's not that relevant a person. That someone was going to invent the idea of transferring money from one place to another over the internet. It just happened to be him. He just happened to be the guy that was in the right place at the right time, writing the code at the right time, right? If he hadn't have done it the next year, somebody would have, right? If the internet had been 5 years later, he just would have done something else, right? And then somebody would have done that. Why? Because oh no, he invented the concept of banking on the internet. Like, get the fuck right out of here. The idea that this guy is a billionaire in the first place hinges completely on the idea that there's a piece of technology that's completely government funded, by the way, that happens to exist right at the moment when he's starting a business as a Stanford graduate in the first place, having like probably Nazi grandparents and like blood gold from South Africa or something. That last part maybe not, but the rest of it stands. Why can't we be elves? Thiel's abandonment of Trump is not the first time he has decided to step away from politics. During college, he co-founded the Stanford Review, gleefully throwing bombs at identity politics and the university's diversity-minded reform of the curriculum. He co-wrote The Diversity Myth in 1995, a treatise against what he recently called the craziness and silliness and stupidity and wickedness of the left. As he built his companies and grew rich, he began pouring money into political causes and candidates. Libertarian groups such as the Endorse Liberty Super PAC, in addition to a wide range of conservative Republicans, including Senators Orrin Hatch and Ted Cruz, and the Anti-Tax Club for Growth's Super PAC. But something changed for Thiel in 2009, the first of several swings of his political pendulum. That year, he wrote a manifesto titled The Education of a Libertarian, in which he disavowed electoral politics as a vehicle for reshaping society. The people, he concluded, could not be trusted with important decisions. I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible, he wrote. Dude, we need to find this article. We need to find this. It was a striking declaration, yeah, because it's fascism. And an even more notable one followed. Since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women, two constituencies that are notoriously tough for libertarians, have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron. He elaborated, after some backlash, that he did not literally oppose women's suffrage, but neither did he affirm his support for it. Thiel laid out a plan for himself and others to find an escape from politics in all its forms. He wanted to create new spaces for personal freedom that governments could not reach, spheres where the choices of one great man could still be paramount, and we'll call it Epstein Island. The fate of our world may depend on the effort of a single person who builds or propagates the machinery of freedom, he wrote. His manifesto has since become legendary in Silicon Valley, where his worldview is shared by other powerful men, and men hoping to be Peter Thiel. Thiel's investment in cryptocurrencies, like his founding vision at PayPal, aimed to foster a new kind of money, free from all government control and delusion. His decision to rescue Elon Musk's struggling SpaceX in 2008, with a $20 million infusion that kept the company alive after 3 botched rocket launches, came with aspirations to promote space as an open frontier, with limitless possibilities to escape from world politics. I tried to reach Musk at X, requesting an interview, but got a poop emoji in response. It was seasteading that became Thiel's great philanthropic cause in the late aughts and early 2010s. The idea, this is wonderful, the idea was to create autonomous microstates on platforms in international waters. This, Thiel believed, was a more realistic path toward functioning libertarian societies in the short term than colonizing space. He gave substantial sums to Patrice Friedman, the grandson of the economist Milton Friedman, to establish the nonprofit Seasteading Institute. So these people's goal is to abandon us. You understand that the society is what enriched Peter Thiel after he was the guy that invented internet banking, as if that wasn't a thing that was going to happen anyway. And now his life's goal, what he's spending all his money on, is to abandon the society that enriched him. I say we take his money away. Thiel told a room full of believers at an institute conference in 2009 that most people don't think seasteading is possible and will therefore not interfere until it's too late. The question of whether seasteading is desirable or possible in my mind is not even relevant, he said. It is absolutely necessary. This guy is doing everything he can to get away from the idea of being a human being that lives in a society. Engineering challenges aside, Max Levchin, his friend and PayPal co-founder, dismissed the idea that Thiel would ever actually move to one of these specks in the sea. There's zero chance Peter Thiel would live on Sealand, he said, noting that Thiel likes his comforts too much. Thiel has mansions around the world and a private jet. Seal performed at his 2017 wedding at the Belvedere Museum in Vienna. Right? So at the end of the day, Peter Thiel is a child, right? He's a child that's upset that somebody gets to tell him what to do, right? That the rest of us could get together and be like, yeah, no, you can't do that. And he goes, I want to. And that's it. By 2015, 6 years after declaring his intent to change the world from the private sector, Thiel began having second thoughts. He cut off funding for the Seasteading Institute. Years of talk had yielded no practical progress, and turned to other forms of escape. He already had German and American citizenship, but he invested millions of dollars in New Zealand and obtained citizenship there in 2011. He bought a former sheep station on 477 acres in the lightly populated South Island that had all the makings of an end times retreat in the country where the Lord of the Rings films were shot. Sam Altman, the former venture capitalist and now CEO of OpenAI, revealed in 2016 that in the event of global catastrophe, he and Thiel plan to wait it out in Thiel's New Zealand hideaway. When I asked Thiel about that scenario, he seemed embarrassed and deflected the question. He did not remember the arrangement as Altman did, he said. Even framing it that way, though, it makes it sound so ridiculous. Oh, he told me. If there is a real end of the world, there is no place to go. Oh, well, there you go. There's a little bit of not being so fucking delusional. Over and over, Thiel has voiced his discontent with what's become of the grand dreams of science fiction in the mid-20th century. We'd have colonies on the moon. You'd have robots. You'd have flying cars. You'd have cities in the ocean, under the ocean, he said in his Seasteading Institute keynote. You'd have eco-farming. You'd turn the deserts into arable land. They were sort of all these incredible things that people thought would happen in the 50s and the 60s and would sort of transform the world. None of that came to pass. Even science fiction turned hopeless. Nowadays, you'd get nothing but dystopias. The tech boom brought us the iPhone and Uber and social media, none of them a fundamental improvement to the human condition. He hungered for advances in the world of atoms, not the world of bits. We've impoverished everyone for our own personal wealth, and everything's worse. I can't figure it out. How come no one is inventing everything as we're desperately impoverishing them and telling them to go work at Starbucks? It doesn't make any sense. For a time, Thiel thought he knew how to set things right. Founders Fund, the venture capital firm he established in 2005 with Luke Nosek and Ken Howery, published a manifesto that complained, we wanted flying cars. Instead, we got 140 characters. The fund, therefore, would invest in smart people solving hard problems that really have the potential to change the world. The trouble is that in Peter Thiel's mind, smart people are people who think like Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel is a very dim-witted, unimpressive person who isn't smart at all and gets his influence of how to view the world from children's fantasy books, right? Like, I love Lord of the Rings like the next person, but I'm not basing my worldview in it, right? I'll happily talk about Lord of the Rings and its themes and the ideas that are expressed within it, the eternal conflict between good and evil, right? The struggle that Frodo and Sam have as they ascend the mountain to throw the ring back into Mordor. But I tend to look at the ring as capitalism, right? That the idea is that they're trying to throw the power structure back in from whence it came. therefore to destroy it. Peter Thiel says, we could be immortal, like the elves. Because he's a very serious person we should very definitely take seriously. And so the people that he hires are people who are just as dim-witted as he is. And he's such a dimwit that he thinks that other dimwits are smart because he thinks that he's smart when in reality he's a fucking dimwit. So of course their projects fail, right? Because they're not actually funding smart people. He's just funding people who agree with him. I joined Thiel one recent Tuesday afternoon for a video conference to review a pair of startups in his portfolio. In his little box on the Zoom screen, he looked bored. Daniel Yu, connecting from Zanzibar, made a short, lucid presentation. His company, Wasoko, was an e-commerce platform for mom-and-pop stores in Africa, supplying shopkeepers with rice, soap, toilet paper, and other basics. Africa is the fastest urbanizing region in the world, and Wasoko's gross margins had doubled since last year. Thiel was looking down at his briefing papers. He read something about Wasoko becoming the Alibaba of Africa, a pet peeve. Anything that's the something of somewhere is the nothing of nowhere, he said a little sourly. So, just for clarity, right? A company that is supplying shopkeepers with rice, soap, toilet papers, and other basics in the fastest urbanizing region in the world, 100% improving the quality of the life for citizens in that place. It's a but the magic elves, and we could go live out on the ocean. Next up was a company called Leica Mascotas in Bogota. Someone on the call described it as the Chewy of Latin America. Thiel frowned. The company delivered pet supplies directly to the home of consumers. It had quadrupled its revenues every year for 3 years. The CEO, Camilo Sanchez Valamiran, walked through the numbers. Thiel thanked him and signed off. This was not what Thiel wanted to be doing with his time. Improving people's lives, helping people get food, water, and basics, letting pets get access to food and pet owners have an easier way to feed their pets. Poppycock! How do we build cities in the sea and live forever like the elves? Bodegas and dog food were making him money, apparently, but he had set out to invest in transformational technology that would advance what he calls the state of human civilization. The trouble is not exactly that Thiel's portfolio is pedestrian or uninspired. Founders Fund has holdings in artificial intelligence, biotech, space exploration, and other cutting-edge fields that impoverish the nation. What bothers Thiel is that his companies are not taking enough big swings at big problems, or that they are striking out because everyone's poor, you dumb fuck. Because all of your smart, intelligent people are working at Starbucks and making you burgers and shit. Because the entire actual wealth of the nation, which is the populace, is living in impoverished conditions where we're barely scraping by and don't have 1 second to sit down and learn anything about these subjects. And so the only people you end up talking to are the yes men who agree with your position in the first place. And your position is so stupid and so dim-witted that it's a strikeout to begin with. Sell dog food, Peter Thiel, and die mad. It was harder than it looked, Thiel said. I'm not actually involved in enough companies that are growing a lot, that are taking our civilization to the next level. Because you couldn't find these companies, I asked. I couldn't find them, he said. I couldn't get enough of them to work. We've impoverished everyone, but I'm a billionaire and spend my money on bullshit. What could possibly be happening? Why is our society stagnating? It's a mystery. In 2018, a Russian named Daniel Bisslinger handed Thiel his business card. The card described him as a foreign service officer. Thiel understood otherwise. He believed that Bisslinger was an intelligence officer with the FSB, the successor to the Soviet KGB. A U.S. intelligence official later told me Thiel was right. The Russian embassy in Berlin, where Bisslinger had been based, did not respond to questions about him. Thiel received an invitation that day and then again in January 2022 to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. No agenda was specified. Thiel had been fascinated by Putin's Tsar-like presence in a room in Davos years before, all champagne and caviar, and you sort of had this gaggle of, I don't know, mafia-like looking oligarchs standing around him, he recalled. But he did not make the trip. Instead, he reported the contact to the FBI, for which Thiel had become a confidential human source code named Philosopher. Thiel's role as an FBI informant, first reported by Insider, dated back to May 2021. This guy's such a fucking loser. Charles Johnson, a tech investor, right-wing attention troll, and longtime associate of Thiel's, told me he himself had become an FBI informant some time ago. Johnson introduced Thiel to FBI Special Agent Jonathan Boomer. A source with close knowledge of the relationship said Boomer told Thiel that he did not want to know about Thiel's contacts with U.S. elected officials or political figures, which were beyond the FBI's investigative interests. Boomer saw his interactions with Thiel, this source said, as strictly a counterintelligence, anti-influence operation directed at foreign governments. Thiel responded to my questions about his FBI relationship with a terse no comment. A close associate, speaking with Thiel's permission, said it would be strange if Peter had never met with people from the deep state, including three-letter agencies, especially given the fact that he founded Palantir 20 years ago. Johnson told me he knows he has a reputation as a right-wing agitator, but said that he had fostered that image in order to gather information for the FBI and other government agencies. He said he is now a supporter of President Joe Biden. I recognize that I'm an imperfect messenger, he said. He told me a great many things about Thiel and others that I could not verify, but knowledgeable sources confirmed his roles in recruiting Thiel for Boomer. He and Thiel have since fallen out. We are taking a permanent break from one another, Thiel texted Johnson about a year ago, starting now. In at least 20 hours of logged face-to-face meetings with Boomer, Thiel reported on what he believed to be a Chinese effort to take over a large venture capital firm, discussed Russian involvement in Silicon Valley, and suggested that Jeffrey Epstein, a man he had met several times, was an Israeli intelligence operative. Thiel told me he thinks Epstein was probably entangled with Israeli military intelligence, but was more involved with the U.S. deep state. Boomer, according to a source who had seen his reports, once asked Thiel why some of the extremely rich seem so open to contracts with foreign governments, and he said that they're bored. The source said, they're bored. And I actually believe it. I think it's that simple. I think they're just bored billionaires. So, Peter Thiel thinks that the reason why billionaires are causing havoc and chaos in the world is because they're bored. We should take their money away. We should take their money away. We should make it so that they don't have access to this amount of wealth that allows them to destroy our society because they're bored. In Thiel's Los Angeles office, he has a sculpture that resembles a three-dimensional game board. Ascent, above the nation-state board game display prototype, is the New Zealander artist Simon Denny's attempt to map Thiel's ideological universe. The board features a landscape in the aesthetic of Dungeons and Dragons, thick with monsters and knights and castles. The monsters include an ogre labeled Monetary Policy. Near the center is a hero figure, recognizable as Thiel. He tilts against a lion and a dragon, holding a shield and a longbow. The lion is labeled Fair Elections. The dragon is labeled Democracy. The Thiel figure is trying to kill them. Teal saw the sculpture at a gallery in Auckland in December 2017. He loved the piece, perceiving it, he told me, as sympathetic to roughly my side of the political spectrum. In fact, the artist intended it as a critique. At the same show, he bought a portrait of his friend Curtis Yarvin, an explicitly anti-democratic writer who calls for a strong-armed leader to govern the United States as a monarch. Teal gave the painting to Yarvin as a gift. When I asked Teal to explain his views on democracy, he dodged the question. I always wonder whether people like you use the word democracy when you like the results people have and use the word populism when you don't like the results, he told me. If I'm characterized as more pro-populist than the elitist Atlantic is, then, in that sense, I'm more pro-democratic. This felt like a debater's riposte not to be taken seriously, because you shouldn't take Peter Thiel seriously, except for the damage that he can do. Like a big giant baby, right? Like a 200-foot tall baby. You wouldn't take that baby seriously at all. Any of the stuff it said, you wouldn't be like, we have to seriously consider this, but you would be like, but it can destroy the city. That's what Peter Thiel is. Just a big, giant, 200-foot tall baby. He had given a more honest answer before that. He told me he no longer dwells on democracy's flaws because he believes we Americans don't have one. We are not a democracy. We are a republic, he said. We're not even a republic. We're a constitutional republic. He said he has no wish to change the American form of government, and then amended himself. Or, I don't think it's realistic for it to be radically changed, which is not at all the same thing. When I asked what he thinks of Yarvin's autocratic agenda, Thiel offered objections that sounded not so much principled as practical. I don't think it's going to work. I think it will look like Xi in China or Putin in Russia, Thiel said, meaning a malign dictatorship. It ultimately, I don't think, will ever be accelerationist or on the science and technology side, to say nothing of what it will do for individual rights, civil liberties, things of that sort. Still, Thiel considers Yarvin an interesting and powerful historian. One of the big things that he always talks about is the New Deal and FDR in 30s and 40s, Thiel said. And the heterodox take is that it was sort of a light form of fascism in the United States. So the one time, according to Peter Thiel, the one time in American history where the government actually passed policies to benefit the people that were wildly successful and worked 100% at the expense of the capitalist class, that was a light form of fascism. We need to get these guys, we need to get the money away from these guys. These guys need to be poor. These guys need to be poor. Like they need, not even poor, just normal. They just need to be normal, right? Franklin D. Roosevelt, in this reading of history, used a domineering view of executive authority, a compliant Congress, and an intimidated Supreme Court to force what Thiel called very, very drastic change in the nature of our society. Yarvin, Thiel said, argues that you should embrace this sort of light form of fascism, and we should have a president who's like FDR again. I mean, we should have a president like FDR again, but to call it a light form of fascism is bonkers and ridiculous. It is to be ahistorical, revisionist, and, frankly, stupid. Passing laws that benefit the majority at the expense of the capitalist class is the opposite of fascism. Wow, Matthias with cap wealth at 100 million. Very generous, Matthias. Very generous. More generous than me. It would be hard to find an academic historian to endorse the view that fascism, light or otherwise, accounted for Roosevelt's presidential power. But I was interested in something else. Did Thiel agree with Yarvin's vision of fascism as a desirable governing model? Again, he dodged the question. That's not a realistic political program, he said, refusing to be drawn any further. I love it. No, that's horrible. What are you talking about? No, it's not feasible. So, looking back on Trump's year in office, Thiel walked a careful line. He was disenchanted with the former president who did not turn out to be the revolutionary Thiel had hoped he might be. A number of things were said and done that Thiel did not approve of. Mistakes were made, but Thiel was not going to refashion himself a never-Trumper in retrospect. The first time Thiel and I spoke, I asked about the nature of his disappointment. Later, he referred back to that question in a way that suggested he felt constrained. I have somehow given the exact right answer, where it's like, yeah, I'm somewhat disenchanted, he told me, but throwing him totally under the bus, that's like, I'll get yelled at by Mr. Trump, and if I don't throw him under the bus, but somehow, I have to get the tone exactly right. What? Dude, this guy's so fucking stupid. Discouraged by Trump's performance, Thiel had quietly stepped aside in the 2020 election. He wrote no check to the second Trump campaign and said little or nothing about it in public. He had not made any grand resolution to stay out. He just wasn't moved to get in. Thiel knew, because he had read some of my previous work, that I think Trump's gravest offense against the Republic was his attempt to overthrow the election. I asked how he thought about it. Look, I don't think the election was stolen, he said. But then he tried to turn the discussion to past elections that might have been wrongly decided. Bush-Gore in 2000, for instance. Thiel thought Gore was probably the rightful victor. Before that, he'd gotten started on a riff about Kennedy and Nixon. He came back to Trump's attempt to prevent the transfer of power. I'll agree with you that it was not very helpful, he said. Put it on a t-shirt, guys. Peter Thiel. Yeah, Trump's attempted overthrow of the government was not very helpful. Peter Thiel. Trump's lies about the election were, however, a big issue in last year's midterms. Thiel was a major donor to J.D. Vance, who won his Senate race in Ohio, and Blake Masters, who lost in Arizona. Both ran as election deniers, as did many of the other House and Senate candidates Thiel funded that year. Thiel expressed no anxieties for their commitment to election denial. But now, heading into 2024, he was getting out of politics again. Beyond his disappointment with Trump, there is another piece of the story, which Thiel reluctantly agreed to discuss. In July, Puck reported that Democratic operatives have been digging for dirt on Thiel since before the 2020 midterm elections, conducting opposition research into his personal life with the express purpose of driving him out of politics. The reported leaders of the opposition campaign did not respond to my questions. Among other things, the operatives are said to have interviewed a young model named Jeff Thomas, who told them he was having an affair with Thiel, and encouraged Thomas to talk to Ryan Grimm, a reporter for The Intercept. Grimm did not publish a story during the election season, as the opposition researchers had hoped he would, but he wrote about Thiel's affair in March, and after Thomas died by suicide. Thiel declined to comment on Thomas's death, citing the family's request for privacy. He deplored the dirt-digging operation, telling me in an email that the nihilism afflicting American politics is even deeper than I knew. So wait, Peter Thiel had a lover, Jeff Thomas, who was doing an interview and then died by suicide. Where have I heard that before? He also seemed bewildered by the passions he arouses on the left. I don't think they should hate me this much, he said. That's exactly what a big giant baby would say. Literally smashing the place, destroying everything, crying that he wants to live forever. Why does everybody hate me? I'm gonna go run off to an island nation that I built based on libertarian principles where I get to do whatever I want and nobody can tell me otherwise. On the last Thursday in April, Thiel stood in a ballroom at the Metropolitan Club, one of New York's finest Gilded Age buildings. Decorative marble fireplaces accented the intricate panel work in burgundy and gold, all beneath Renaissance-style ceiling murals. Thiel had come to receive an award for the New Criterion, a conservative magazine of literature and politics, and to bask in the attention of nearly 300 fans. An award for what? An award for just being rich? Hey, let's give him an award. Let's give him an award for being rich. These were Thiel's people, and he spoke at the closed-pressed event with a lot less nuance than he had in our interviews. His after-dinner remarks were full of easy applause lines and in-jokes mocking the left. Universities had become intellectual wastelands, obsessed with a meaningless quest for diversity, he told the crowd. He's a homosexual. That's what's so funny about this. The humanities writ large are transparently ridiculous, said the one-time philosophy major. There's no real science going on. Aren't you the one that's funding the sciences? Aren't you the one that's trying to do that? Oh, no, you're trying to build a sea island in the sciences, which have devolved into the enforcement of a very curious dogma. Thiel reprised his longtime critique of the diversity myth. He made a plausible point about the ideological monoculture of the DEI industry. You don't have real diversity, he said, with people who look different but talk and think alike. Then he made a crack that seemed more revealing. Diversity. It's not enough to just hire the extras from a space cantina scene in Star Wars, he said, prompting laughter. Nor did Thiel say what genuine diversity would mean. The quest for it, he said, is very evil, and it's very silly. Evil, he explained, because the silliness is distracting us from very important things, such as the threat to U.S. interests posed by the Chinese Communist Party. What a little boy this guy is. His closing, which used the same logic, earned a standing ovation. Whenever someone says DEI, he extorted the crowd, just think CCP. Somebody asked in the Q&A portion of the evening whether Thiel thought the woke left was deliberately advancing Chinese communist interests. Thiel answered with an unprompted jab at a fellow billionaire. It's always the difference between an agent and an asset, he said. And an agent is someone who is working for the enemy in full mens rea. An asset is a useful idiot. So even if you ask the question, is Bill Gates China's top agent or top asset in the U.S.? Here the crowd started roaring. Does it really make a difference? The only reason anyone thinks that that's funny is because you're a billionaire. That's the lamest shit I've ever heard in my life. This guy is surrounded by people who are going to go, no matter what he says. He's surrounded by yes men who do what he says and think the way that he thinks. And moreover, he's even against the idea of diversifying. So he's surrounded himself with like-minded people on purpose. That's crazy. And he's just completely has no self-awareness whatsoever, right? He is literally a big giant baby. Thiel sometimes uses Gates as a foil in his public remarks, so I asked him what he thought of the Giving Pledge, the campaign Gates conceived in 2010 with his then-wife Melinda French Gates and Warren Buffett to persuade billionaires to give away more than half their wealth to charitable causes, which was completely fraudulent, by the way. The whole thing was a total fraud. We're going to give all our money to terrible donations that are actually businesses we've called charities, so don't tax us. In fact, we can write off most of our expenses as businesses. They're businesses. Disclosure, one of my sons works for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Good for you, bud. About 10 years ago, Thiel told me a fellow venture capitalist called to broach the question. Vinod Khosla, a co-founder of Sun Microsystems, had made the giving pledge a couple of years before. Would Thiel be willing to talk with Gates about doing the same? I don't want to waste Bill Gates' time, Thiel replied. Thiel feels that giving his billions away would be too much like admitting he had done something wrong to acquire them. The prevailing view in Europe, he said, and more in the United States, is that philanthropy is something an evil person does. It raises a question, he said. What are you atoning for? So, keeping money away from people who need it is good, actually. He also lacked sympathy for the impulse to spread resources from the privileged to those in need. When I mentioned the terrible poverty and inequality around the world, he said, I think there are enough people working on that. And besides, a different cause moves him far more. One night in 1999, or possibly 2000, Thiel went to a party in Palo Alto with Max Levchin, where they heard a pitch for an organization called the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. Alcor was trying to pioneer a practical method of biostasis, a way to freeze the freshly dead in hope of revivification one day. Don't picture the reanimation of an old enfeebled corpse, enthusiasts at the party told Levchin. The idea, of course, is that long before we know how to revive dead people, we would learn how to repair your cellular membranes and make you young and virile and beautiful and muscular, and then we'll revive you, Levchin recalled. Levchin found the whole thing morbid and couldn't wait to get out of there, but Thiel signed up as an Alcor client. Should Thiel happen to die one day, I love that that's phrased as if it's not when Thiel dies, like should Thiel happen to die one day, best efforts notwithstanding, his arrangements with Alcor provide that a cryonics team will be standing by. The moment he is declared legally dead, medical technicians will connect him to a machine that will restore respiration and blood flow to his corpse. This step is temporary, meant to protect his brain and slow the dying process. The patient, as Alcor calls its dead client, is then cooled in an ice water bath, and their blood is replaced with an organ preservation solution. Next, ideally within the hour, Thiel's remains will be whisked to an operating room in Scottsdale, Arizona. A medical team will perfuse cryoprotectants through his blood vessels in an attempt to reduce the tissue damage wrought by extreme cold. Then, his body will be cooled to negative 196 degrees Celsius, the temperature of liquid nitrogen. After slipping into a double-walled, vacuum-insulated metal coffin alongside, so far, 222 other corpuscles, the patient is now protected from deterioration for theoretically thousands of years, Alcor literature explains. All that will be left for Thiel to do, entombed in his vault, is await the emergence of some future society that has the wherewithal and inclination to revive him, and then make his way in a world in which his skills and education and fabulous wealth may be worth
nothing at all. Teal knows that cryonics is still not working that well. When flesh freezes, he says, neurons and cellular structures get damaged. But he figures cryonics is better than the alternative, meaning the regular kind of death that nobody comes back from. Of course, if he had the choice, Teal would prefer not to die in the first place. In the 2000s, he became enamored with the work of Aubrey de Grey, a biomedical gerontologist from England, who predicted that science would soon enable someone to live for 1,000 years. By the end of that span, future scientists would have devised a way to extend life still further, and so on to immortality. A charismatic figure with a prodigious beard and a doctorate from Cambridge, de Grey resembled an Orthodox priest in mufti. He preached to Teal for hours at a time about the science of regeneration. De Grey called his research program SENS, short for Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence. Teal gave several $1 million to de Grey's Methuselah Foundation and the SENS Research Foundation, helping fund a lucrative prize for any scientist who could stretch the lifespan of mice to unnatural lengths. 4 such prizes were awarded, but no human applications have yet emerged. I wondered how much Teal had thought through the implications for society of extreme longevity. The population would grow exponentially. Resources would not. Where would everyone live? What would they do for work? What would they eat and drink? Or let's face it, would a 1,000-year lifespan be limited to men and women of extreme wealth? Well, I may self-serve, he said, perhaps understating the point, but I worry more about stagnation than inequality. Teal is not alone among his Silicon Valley peers in his obsession with immortality. Oracle's Larry Ellison has described mortality as incomprehensible. Google's Sergey Brin aspires to cure death. Dmitry Istkov, a leading tech entrepreneur in Russia, has said he hopes to live to 10,000. If anything, Teal thinks about death more than they do, and kicks himself for not thinking about it enough. I should be investing way more money into this stuff, he told me. I should be spending way more time on this. And then he made an uncomfortable admission about that frozen death vault in Scottsdale, dipping his head and giving a half smile of embarrassment. I don't know if that would actually happen, he said. I don't even know where the contracts are, where all the records are. And then of course you'd have to have the people around you know where to do it, and they'd have to be informed. And I haven't broadcast it, except now in the Atlantic, you dumb fuck. You haven't told your husband? Wouldn't you want him to sign up alongside you? I mean, I will think about that, he said, sounding rattled. I will think. I have not thought about that. You don't want your husband to come along with you. You want to be free, right? That's what this is all about. You don't want to answer to anybody. You want total freedom, immortality forever, doing whatever it is you want with nobody telling you otherwise because you're a big fucking baby. He picked up his hand and gestured, stop. Enough about his family. Teal already does a lot of things to try and extend his lifespan. He's on a paleo diet. He works out with a trainer. He suspects that nicotine is a really good nootropic drug that raises your IQ 10 points, and is thinking about adding a nicotine patch to his regimen. He has spoken of using a human growth hormone pill to promote muscle mass. Until recently, he was taking semaglutide, the drug in Ozempic, Lately, he has switched to a weekly injection of Mounjaro, an anti-diabetic drug commonly used for weight loss. He doses himself with another anti-diabetic, metformin, because he thinks it has a significant effect in suppressing the cancer risk. Soon he'll just be drinking blood, and the sun, he won't be able to stand in it because its withering gaze will burn his skin. In the HBO series Silicon Valley, one of the characters, though not the one widely thought to be modeled on Teal, had a blood boy, who gave him regular transfusions of youthful serum. I thought Teal would laugh at that reference, but he didn't. I've looked into all these different, somewhat heterodox things, he said, noting that periabiosis, as the procedure is called, seems to slow aging in mice. He wishes the science were more advanced. No matter how fervent his desire, Teal's extraordinary resources still can't buy him the kind of super-duper medical treatments that would let him slip the grasp of death. It is, perhaps, his ultimate disappointment. There are lots of these things I can't do with my money, Teal said. Dude, when this guy dies, I'm gonna laugh. When this guy dies, I'm gonna laugh. The people who are afraid of death, right? These people, to answer your question, June, right, if his life is so awful, it's just so terrible being rich, why does he want to live to the age of 1,000? It's not because they like this place, it's because they're afraid of death. They don't respect the universe, they don't respect their creator, they don't respect what this is or why we're here. They don't think about that. All they think about is themselves. That's all they think about. They don't think about their connection to the universe. They don't think about their connection to their creator. They don't contemplate or consider, why is it that we were created in the first place? And what is this process? What is this process of birth, life, and death? What is that process? And how does that process actually work? Why are we a part of it? What is the goal, if there is a goal to be had? Why do things die in the first place? These are all very serious questions that I think are worth contemplating. But instead, Peter Thiel is just that's spooky. I don't want to deal with it. Right? So instead of dealing with the actual question of death and just accepting it and just being okay, death, there it is. It's very real, unavoidable. It's right in front of you. You are going to experience it. It's going to happen. There are not that many guarantees in life. This is one of them. This is a universal thing that binds us all together and ties us all together. And psychopaths like Peter Thiel actually believe that he's just going to sidestep it. That for some reason, the universe, the creative force of all power and all creation, is going to think that he's the special one. You're my special little big giant 200-pound baby. You're definitely going to get the little kiss from Jesus Christ and live forever, Peter Thiel. That's definitely what's 100% going to happen, you unserious little child. Look death in the face, be a man, grow up, actually acknowledge that your creator is more powerful than you are, and that you are actually not as important as you think you are, right? And then, you know what might actually happen? You might actually begin to perceive those around you as your equals, right? Instead of viewing them as you do, as an NPC, right? That Peter Thiel views the people who are in the world as NPCs, that they exist to serve him exclusively, right? That the only reason he did this interview is so that he can spread around the news of how he wants to live forever and tell everybody about how he's no longer interested in being a part of democracy. This was all a vanity project for him. This is all about his own personal vanity and his own inability to comprehend and understand that the people who are in this world and the people who are around him are his equals. That the only thing that separates him and them is his good fortune. that he was lucky enough to be born at exactly the right time with exactly the right positioning to take advantage of exactly the right technology to invent a thing that was going to be invented, like transferring money over the internet. Yeah, like big breakthrough there, right? Big brain time, right? Certainly nobody was ever going to do that, right? He just happened to be the guy. And instead of actually acknowledging any of that, he falls into this absolute childish mode of thinking that has convinced him that he's somehow special or good, right? And he views everybody around him as a tool to be used, and he gets frustrated when people don't bend the knee to him. And moreover, he surrounds himself with people who agree with him. Morons who are clapping at his stupid jokes, idiots who are not going to push back on him, right? While he espouses an anti-diversity narrative, which is perfect because he doesn't want to be surrounded by people with diverse views in the first place. He doesn't want someone to come up to him and recognize him for what he is, which is a scared little boy who's literally afraid of death. Like, he might as well be afraid of the dark. You understand? And this person we've given billions of dollars to. This is the person that people in Silicon Valley aspire to. They look up to. And they think, boy, I want to be like Peter Thiel, a scared little boy who's afraid of death. Our society deserves to collapse. It deserves to fail. It deserves exactly what it's going to get, because we've handed the reins of the society over to these absolute demented losers who are worshiping money, worshiping themselves, and worshiping chaos. We deserve exactly what we're going to get, because these are the people who are in charge. Crikey indeed, Storyscape. Crikey indeed. Orcs is best. Sorry I've been ignoring the chat a little bit, guys. I really wanted to get through that. Orcs is best. First of all, bud, strong name. Strong name. Orcs is best. You're right. What do you think happens after death? I don't think it matters. I don't think that we will be able to comprehend it. That's the hard truth. But though Mark Twain has a really great quote that surmises more or less, and I can get into the big long explanation if you really want, but Mark Twain has a quote that really surmises my feelings on the matter, which is, I didn't much mind when I wasn't here. I don't think I'll much mind when I'm gone. And I think that's more or less the case, that we tend to take a very individualist view of, well, what's going to happen to me? I'm gonna die, and then I'll wake up my eyes and I'll be surrounded by pitchforks. Oh my God, I'm in hell, right? That kind of childish, reductive view. But you're not an individual, right? Like you have a certain degree of individualism, but in the grand scope of the creative force of what this is, you're not an individual. You're part of a larger body, right? And you dying is just a return to that larger body. And it's very likely that that larger body is going to be pretty forgiving, right? Even of just detached psychopaths and stuff, and just be like, yeah, you were just like a little monkey on a floating rock. Like, what the fuck could you have possibly known, right? You exist to be like my eyes and ears in the world, that you exist just to sort of look around and be like, oh, this is what's going on, right? And it makes total sense that millions and millions of you would just get lost in the sauce. That you just wake up every day and be like, I'm a scared little monkey, I need food and shelter. I'm a scared little monkey, I need food and shelter. Haha, I like pornography and Marvel movies. Haha, makes total sense, right? It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of loss, and it takes a lot of ridiculous nonsense to get somebody into a state where they're like, hold on, wait a minute. I'm a randomly generated life form, living in a randomly generated place. I don't really have control of my own skill sets and what I'm capable of. And I exist, seemingly, only to see, hear, touch, and taste, and maybe articulate what the fuck is going on? Huh. Interesting. And that's kind of it. Right? That's kind of it. And I'm more or less of the opinion that it's a goddamn good thing that we die. Right? Can you imagine if someone like Peter Thiel was 10,000 years old? You're talking about like a vampiric death cult, like somebody controlling an empire, like straight up like Warhammer 40K, like the Dark Emperor bullshit. There he is, and we got to deal with that. Nah. It's good that people die because their stupid, dumb ideas die with them. Right? Their stupid, dumb ideas die with them, and then new ideas come in. Oh yeah, stick around, Orcs is best. It's my favorite subject. I love talking about death and the meaning of life and why we're here. You want to really like get me to start talking about that? You just keep pushing at that, because I'll definitely talk about that. Because it's the most interesting thing going on. I generally talk about politics because politics is the second most interesting thing going on. Because it's like, what are the monkeys doing? What's humanity doing? Right? Why do we act the way we do? Why are we doing what we're doing? Right? But really, like, life is about our interaction with our creator and about reality itself and why we're here and what we're doing. Right? That's really what it's about. And if all of us really understood that, like if we all understood that we are aspects of our creator, that we're here at the behest of a universal creator that's just trying to discover its own self, if we all actually understood that, we wouldn't fight. We wouldn't withhold food and shelter from people. We would genuinely be like, oh yeah, you're an aspect of my creator just as I am, so you need food, you need shelter, here it is, let's go. Right? And the capitalists don't think that way because the capitalists think like Peter Thiel, right? Like psychopathic, nightmare, vampiric death knights who are little boys that are afraid of death, right? Who don't respect their creator, who don't respect the position they have in life, who are children that essentially grow up and die as children, right? Who are too dim-witted and stupid to understand that there are forces greater than them. And that if just because they earned their money, right? Well, too bad. Give it away anyway. Right? Give it away anyway. Give it to the poor. Give it to the needy. Improve the society. Right? If you actually cared about improving your society, Peter Thiel doesn't. He's constantly trying to escape from it. Right? He's constantly trying to run away from it. He wants Mars colonies, and he wants to go out and build island nations and all this kind of stuff. He's constantly trying to find a way to get away from all of us, and so he can keep his wealth and structure a society in his own madcap version where magic is real and death doesn't exist. Like, these people are mental. They're insane. Right? And we've enriched them. These are the richest people maybe in the history of the world. And they're walking around openly saying that my goal is to abandon all of you and be immortal. Like, fuck these people. Like, fuck these people. Right? If this guy existed in the literature he worships, he would be a villain. For sure. And everyone would know it right away. Everyone would be like, and in walked Lord Peter of Thiel, espousing his desire to abandon his plebs and find immortality for himself through a process of cryogenesis. Oh, that's the bad guy for sure. Right here. I don't think the poor should be helped. Bad guy. Bad guy. We would all see it. It would be immediate. But for some reason, because he's here in front of you, in the world around you, there's like a fritz that happens in your brain where you're like, he earned his money, he must be a good guy. He's so helpful. He earned it. Yuck. That if he walked in front of you in a movie, you'd be like, boo! Popcorn throw! The villain, clearly. But if he walked in front of you in reality, you're like, yes, Mr. Thiel. Whatever you say, do you need the blood of my firstborn child, Mr. Thiel? This guy's a villain, obviously. And it's so obvious it's ridiculous it needs to be said. He despises God. Like, what do you need? Like, what do you need? Yeah, I'm not a communist whatsoever. Yeah, most people aren't. No, and it's good. Yeah, extending life is a much too much is a really, really bad idea. Look, I mean, if you want my actual take on it, I think that nature will extend our lives, right? As long as we play by its rules, right? That's what makes Peter Thiel such a tragic figure in this, and people like Faust a tragic figure, right? Is that if this place was worth keeping people in, reality would do that, right? That if everything was clean and beautiful and pristine and the time that you spent here was really lovely and everybody was living in peace and it was all songs and dancing and food was plentiful and everything was temperate and there was protection from the elements and all of that kind of stuff, then our lives would extend because the place would be worth staying in. But if the place is a shithole, it sucks to be here and everything's terrible and your stress is through the roof, then you're going to leave earlier, right? That the idea that we're just going to extend life while destroying the planet is so stupid. I can't even begin to tell you how stupid an idea that is. You want to extend people's lives? Make the environment worth having an extended life in. That's how you start. Turn your deserts to forests. Make food plentiful so everyone can have it. Make sure no one is ever homeless. Give everyone as much leisure time as they can possibly have. Ensure that everyone is living the highest quality of life that they can possibly get. And you know what's going to happen? People are going to live longer. Just because they're going to be like, yeah, this place is great. We're going to stay here. Right? I don't have any stress. I get to have sex all the time. I get to eat food whenever I want. I get to go out and party. I get to do what I want. I get to pursue what I want. Sure, I got to put some labor in to support the society to the degree that it needs to be done, but there's no capitalists that we need to fucking give money to living in a fucking castle, sitting there being like, how do I live forever with the blood of babies? Like, get rid of these people. Improve the society, and you know what's going to happen? People are going to live longer. If you actually cared about that, Peter Thiel doesn't. He's a little baby. If you actually cared about extending the life of the entire populace, well, make this place worth living. And guess what? It's not. Like, this place isn't that nice. Right? This place is a weird little shithole run by necromancers. We're literally digging corpses out of the earth to make elixirs to throw into infernal machines so that we can drive to places we hate to waste our lives doing nothing that is important whatsoever so that some capitalist somewhere can go, yes, I'm very powerful. That's it. That's what we're doing. It's necromancy. We're morons, right? All we do is watch these goddamn dumbass Marvel movies that suck and always did. And we go home and jerk off to porn and then go to sleep and wake up and do it again. It's the stupidest existence that we could possibly create. This reality is a Rick and Morty parody planet. It is a place that Rick and Morty would come to, and they would be like, oh, geez, Rick, they all sacrificed their lives for nothing, doing something completely pointless for people who despise them? Why? They're sheep, Morty. They keep watching tits and Marvel movies. Just ignore them. We got to get the Fliverol flang. Oh, okay. Don't you think we could help these people? No, they're a lost cause, Morty. And then they get the thing they want. They get in, maybe blow up a thing while on their way out and leave. And we would all go, ha ha, what a stupid place that definitely would never exist. Oh, gotta go to bed so I can go get into my fossil fuel car to burn the corpses to get to the place I hate to do nothing. And then come home and jerk off and do it again. That's what we do. That's our lives. We deserve everything we're going to get. We deserve all of it. We deserve the oceans coming up. We deserve the famines. We deserve the fascism that's taking over our society. We deserve all of it. Right? We deserve all of it. Because we are too stupid to actually realize that what we are doing is a death cult. We are too stupid to realize that money is not real, that we invented it and it is stupid to waste your life in the pursuit of it. We are too stupid to realize that there are people outside of yourself that actually matter, and that caring about the well-being of others is actually caring about yourself as well. And we are too stupid to realize that just trying to do stuff is a terrible way to run a society. We are going to experience a level of chaos and ridiculous nonsense that we have not seen in this plane of reality for 100 years, maybe even longer than that. And we deserve every single second of it because of our stupid, dim-witted, moronic ideas and our inability to look at our creator and say, yeah, I bet you they probably know what's going on more than we do. I bet you anything that the force of nature that was capable of creating us and all things and the planet itself is probably capable of dealing with some pollution. We just got to stop polluting. No, we're too dumb for that. We gotta get in my big fuck Trudeau truck and gotta make sure we drive to the place that we hate and do the job that's absolutely pointless to achieve nothing whatsoever. Shuffle those papers around so that my boss gets to have a Porsche. I got a Bugatti. I'm the smartest guy. Ha 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 ha. I escaped the Matrix. Like this is how stupid we are. It's extraordinarily stupid. And just when I think we've achieved the stupidest we can be, we just break on through to the other side, baby. We just get a little bit stupider and just get a little stupider. And we're going to get so stupid. We're going to have people jackbooting down streets. We're going to have like everybody's going to get the like there's going to be big purges and shit. Like stations like this are going to get shut down for sure. Like there's going to be incredibly stupid, crazy Nazi shit, and the people who are doing it are going to be like, this is for freedom. They're going to hold a cross and usher in the apocalypse. Now, it's okay if the water levels come up because those people will just sell their houses and move. Like, the ruling class has gone full-blown mask-off fascist. They are Nazis. We're literally committing an open genocide in Gaza right now. Just straight up just being like, yeah, it's a normal thing, no ceasefire, whatever. Right? And if they're going to do that to those people, they're definitely going to do it to you. Like, don't think they won't. And at the end of the day, we're ruled by these guys that are literally spending all their money to impoverish you, escape from the society that they're destroying, and attempt to become immortal. Like, abandon this project back, you guys. Abandon this society back. It's over. It's done. This thing is finished. It's not going to get better. It is only going to get worse. And the only people who are going to end up with any amount of money whatsoever at the end of this thing is the military. That's where this all goes, you guys. This all goes into the final phase, which is a military takeover and a military dictatorship. That's where this actually all goes. You can't fund a military on this scale and then expect them to just stand by and be like, yeah, we're just going to let this all happen. That's fine. Doop-a-doop-doop-doop-doop-doop-doop. Why do you think they're building Cop City? Like, what do you think's going to happen when all these boys come home? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Right? We already have the billionaire class saying, I don't know about this democracy thing. Like, the American military is going to do what it did abroad at home. It's going to come home and it's going to establish little dictatorships all throughout the countries. There's going to be a general balkanization. You might have revolts here and there, and maybe even some that are successful. Because the people who run this place are psychopaths. That this is a psychopathic capitalist death cult. And the next 20 years are going to be nuts. They're going to be absolutely fucking crazy. So knock on your neighbor's door and get to know their name. the spaghetti episode of Rick and Morty. Yeah, I don't know. I liked that they tried to do something like that, but the message at the end, I was like, I didn't buy it. For those who don't know, the Rick and Morty episode is basically that Rick finds a planet of... spoilers, by the way, if you don't want spoilers for this episode. Rick finds a planet of people who, when they die by suicide, they turn into spaghetti, like really delicious spaghetti. And Morty informs, out of guilt, Morty ends up informing the government that this is the case. And so the government restructures its society to essentially be a wasteland where everyone wants to commit suicide in because it's so horrible, so that they can sell spaghetti intergalactically and make a lot of money. And then Rick ends up dismantling the entire thing because he has someone willingly commit suicide, but right when he commits suicide, he projects that person seeing their life, like, my life flashed before my eyes. So Rick projects that throughout the entire galaxy, so everyone sees this guy's life before he becomes spaghetti. And the point that I was just like, no, I don't buy it, is that at the end, everybody goes, oh, it's gross, oh, I'm eating a person, oh, his life story, all that kind of stuff. I don't think so. I think that there would be a huge section of humanity, like if it's about humans, right? I think there would be a huge section of humanity that would be like, yeah, well, bon appetit. They wouldn't care at all. That was the part of the story that I was like, nah. I think that there would be a huge section of the society that would be like, wow, sad story. Go. And they would just eat it anyway. Right? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just don't buy into this idea that 100% of humanity is capable of compassion or empathy, right? That it was a weird little moment in a show like Rick and Morty that has an extremely nihilistic and sort of dark view of humanity, where that in that moment it was like, oh, you guys actually have like a really positive view of humanity. That you think reality is fucked up, but that humanity is more or less good, right? And I'm just like, not there. I'm like, nah, 30% of society is psychotic, or at least willing to go along with the psychos, right? 30% of the populace would be like, oh, wow, he what a life he lived. How interesting. Spaghetti in my face, please. Suicide spaghetti, please. So that was my problem with that episode. That I was just like, I didn't buy the ending at all. I was just like, yeah, 20%. I'd buy 20%. Like 30% might be a bit aggressive, but I'm kind of infusing this recent poll. And it just seems like every single time a poll like this happens, the number is about 30%, 68% of American respondents in the Reuters Ipsos poll agree with the statement that Israel should call a ceasefire and try to negotiate, whereas 31% of respondents said they're supporting sending Israel weapons, and 43% oppose the idea. So 30% of respondents said they want to do a genocide. So 30% of America, 31% of America is completely on board with the idea of committing a genocide. And they don't give a fuck. No. Israel has the right to defend itself. We don't give a fuck. Go in, bomb the place. It's fine. 30%. Thanks, Resist Occupiers. Good to see you, by the way, bud. Didn't have didn't say hello when you first came in. Good to see you, my man. The Guardian has removed their translation of bin Laden's letter to the West. Germany is making support for Israel a requirement for citizenship. Israel deletes the video of the Shifa hospital because no tunnels were found. Yep. No. What's going on in Israel is it's a straight up... I don't even know why they're trying to pretend anymore. Like, I'm sorry, man. They released this document. I don't know why they're trying to pretend. Like... that's the thing that's so funny. Like, I guess they're trying to pretend because they know how stupid we are. Like, they know how gullible we are and how dumb we are and how susceptible to propaganda we are. So, like, you might as well try, I guess. even though it's always lame and it's so transparent and so obvious. But it just seems like there is a section of the populace that's like, oh, like they just buy it. Yeah, at least 36% of the German population voted for Hitler in the 1932 German presidential election. Yeah, that's fair to point out, June. Like, people sort of believe that Hitler, like, just took power and was just such, like that he was, like, it's the great man of history fallacy, right? Something that I think Peter Thiel has fallen for pretty dramatically. But the idea that Hitler rose to power because of his own personal greatness and his own personal charisma. No, Hitler rose to power because people agreed with him. Like, he was well funded by industrial capitalists. His message was able to spread around the best because he was well funded by industrial capitalists. And a lot of people agreed with him. Like, that's it. And it's very much how, like, Jordan Peterson gets spread around. Like, Peterson is an idiot and is wrong about most things. But he has incredibly huge backing. And so everybody knows who he is, even though he's a moron. Like, it's the same story. It's just that Hitler managed to take power and then became the president, right? And then did what he said he wanted to do, which is what people wanted. Like, that 36% of the German population was like, yes, get those Jews, right? Content, everything the West is doing is just, man, I didn't think I'd end up a third worldist. Like, it's all self-sabotage, you know? Like, I really think that a lot of it is due to the fact that we are so young. That we are such a young nation. Like, when you start to think of civilizations and nations as entities of themselves, of kind of life forms in and of themselves, that we are all part of, like, a cell, and that cell is, the cell is Texas. You got a cell called Texas, and all of those cells have banded together to create a larger body that we call the United States, right? And the United States is itself a larger organism that's part of the North American continent, which is itself part of this global thing that we call Earth, right? Once you start to sort of see it that way, and you sort of understand the idea of zeitgeists and collective consciousnesses and that sort of thing, you begin to really understand that like, most people aren't making decisions rationally. That most things are about like people don't really make rational decisions, right? People post-rationalize. What do I think Jordan is wrong about? Literally anything. Like, say anything that you think Jordan Peterson is a genius about, and he's wrong about it. Like, he's incorrect from the beginning. The only thing I think that he is actually correct about is clean your room. I think he is correct about that. But that's pretty banal. It's pretty basic stuff. Like, most of the rest of the shit that he talks about is just baby brain bullshit that he just kind of says. And he's not very profound or smart or intelligent. Like, he hyper worships the individual in a system that is collective by its very nature. He hyper worships status and wealth, right? Like, so he worships billionaires. But he doesn't care about free speech. That's not what he's talking about, right? He cares about people's ability to say the N-word, right? Yeah, free speech for who? Right? That you interpret what he's saying to be, you're correct. Everyone should say what they want to be able to say. Whereas what he's talking about is terrorizing people. Like, that's what he's talking about. Oh, so I should be able to stand up in a theater and just scream fire and cause a panic? Free speech. So I should be able to scream at somebody that I'm coming to their house to murder them? Free speech. Right? Free speech. I should be able to do that, right? Free speech. Should I be able to do speeches where I talk about rounding up groups of the populace? Is that fine? Free speech. Right? Like, is that all fine? Is it fine to cause panics? Is it fine to terrorize minority groups? Right? No, but that's what free speech is. Like, what do you think he's talking about? Like, what do you think he's actually talking about? Because when you actually listen to what he says, you know what he's talking about? He's talking about terrorizing trans people, right? He's talking about the criminalization of being a trans person, which is how he got popular in the first place, was through his protest of a law. He lied to everybody about the nature of this law that got passed. Was saying, like, if they fine me for being for not following the law, I won't follow it, and I won't pay the fine. I'll go to jail, and all kind of like hysteria spreading. Right? He was spreading hysteria the entire time, due to his transphobia that he obviously was spreading, very clearly spreading, while being a total fraudulent liar about the nature of the law. Like literally, if you are a trans person who is just coming into a space where you are permitted to be alive without getting the shit kicked out of you, right? That the liberals actually passing that law was a way for them to say, hey, trans people exist and they should have the right to exist. And Peterson stood up against it because he doesn't want trans people to exist in a very straightforward way. Because he's a transphobe, right? Because he's a very clear transphobe. And his defense of free speech in this regard is to say that, yeah, people should be able to terrorize trans people. Right? That's certainly how the trans population takes it, while they get terrorized by Nazis regularly. I work with 5 trans people. So don't fucking pretend like this doesn't happen. Right? I live in an area that has become like a trans safe space. Where the trans people know that they can work in this establishment without being terrorized or discriminated against. And they tell me stories. They do not view Jordan Peterson as a hero. So when Peterson stands up and starts talking about free speech, he means the free speech to terrorize minorities. That's what he means, and that's what he does, and that's what his followers do. And if you want to pretend otherwise, get the fuck right out of here. Yeah, 1984 is when no N-word. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I feel like content, to respond to your point, I feel like YouTube, its algorithm has gotten even tighter. Right? Like every single time one of these world events happen, the algorithm gets tighter. It happened when the Ukrainian thing happened. It's happening now with the genocide. Right? And the algorithm's obviously listening to what I'm saying. It knows that I'm talking about the Israeli genocide. Or the Palestinian genocide, rather. Do you think he advocates for the assault of trans people? He's not saying out loud that trans people should be assaulted, but he doesn't want them to exist as a group. And that's obvious, dude. Like, come on, man. Like, you got to absolutely be fucking kidding me if you don't think Jordan Peterson has launched a full-scale rhetoric-based assault against the trans community, and that he expects that rhetoric to manifest itself in violence against that community. Like, if you think that way, you are joking yourself. Like, you are absolutely fucking out to lunch. If you think that the people who listen to Jordan Peterson are not translating that into physical acts of violence against the trans community. Like, it is extremely obvious that Jordan Peterson does not want trans people to exist. Like, obvious. Like, 1 + 1 = 2, obvious. And if you don't think so, then I don't know why I need to tolerate you. Like, listen to anything he has ever said on the subject ever. For real. Like, go back and watch that creepy little Twitter video he did
Right? Jordan Peterson Twitter response video Elliot Page. Do. Up yours, woke moralists. Like this creepy ass video. This creepy ass video where he looked like a fucking Batman villain, right? And listen to it. Listen to it as if you're a trans person. A trans person who understands that this guy has clout, he has followers, right? And really hear it. Like actually listen to it. And when you actually listen to it from the position of a trans person, it is unequivocal. He does not want trans people to exist. How do you make sure trans people do not exist? Is it through free speech? If you want to see a really good video about Jordan Peterson, I really recommend some more news. Cody Johnson did a really good breakdown of Jordan Peterson that I recently rewatched. Come on, internet. Let's just... Jordan. A brief look at Jordan Peterson. This right here. It's incredibly long, hence the joke, right? A brief look at Jordan Peterson. It's 3 hours long. He does an extremely comprehensive breakdown of Jordan Peterson and essentially just shows how fucking fraudulent this guy is. And he is extremely fraudulent and dangerous. Some of the shit that he says and some of the shit that he believes openly is terrifying, right? Like Nazi adjacent stuff. And like, I don't think that we should tolerate this person. I don't think that we should tolerate a guy like this walking around saying the things that he's saying. That it's not free speech what he's doing. That he is flirting with the idea of doing massive amounts of damage to minorities and to small groups. And he just flirts with, what can I get away with? What can I get away with? What can I get away with? It's why he lost his tenure at the university. It's why he is not a respected intellectual in his own circles. It's why no one in any position of authority anywhere references or uses his works. Right? Don't you think that's a bit odd that no one anywhere in any circle anywhere takes this guy seriously? It's because he has massive backing by homophobes, transphobes, and racists like him to spread around the bile that he spreads around through kind of like a secret little code. Right? He's created like one little veneer of like civility and civil code where he understands where the line is, and so he just goes right up to that line and talks in this little code. And if you are a person of color, trans or gay, you know exactly what he's talking about. That it's only straight white people who are stupid enough to think that Jordan Peterson is innocuous and just trying to help. Wow, he told my son to clean up his room, and he did. Hayuckles. Like, the minute you listen to this guy from any other perspective other than straight white male, you realize real fast, that he is a dangerous person who is espousing an extremely violent narrative. Cody Johnson breaks it down. I highly advise you watch it. All right, guys, that's as fine a note to end on as any, I think. As any.
JP and the cock milking incident was wild. Absolutely it was, DJ. Like, the moment, I know that I said I'm going to end, but I will talk about this. The moment that Jordan Peterson lost his credibility entirely was when he went on Joe Rogan's show and denied climate change. That was the moment when all of us should have stood up and been like, okay, it's over. Like, it's over. Not only should that have been a moment when you stopped listening to him as a credible source for anything, it should have made you go back over all of the stuff he's ever said and reassess it. Because if he's willing to stand up in front of us and lie about climate change as it's happening, as he does, and he does it for money, right? If he's willing to do that, then what else is he lying to you about? And the answer is basically everything. Because, unshockingly, he's a homophobic, transphobic racist. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize. It. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.